Chapter 1181. In the sky, the battle between Qin Guang and the Mosquito King was still ongoing. Peasant didn't know how long it would last and whether Mr. Dang could win. However, she did not have the qualification to refuse the side mission, and the reward points have been forcibly issued to her head. Even the killing mission seemed to be afraid that she would not perform well. It was very considerate to remind her that if she did not complete the recording work as required, she would immediately be reset. Peasant didn't have the right to reject the mission, but she didn't use time deceleration on everyone. Instead, she placed her hand in her pocket and placed her finger on the hourglass. She activated the hourglass and sped up her own time. Everyone's attention was focused on the explosions in midair. Nobody noticed that Peasant was twisting his head and body at a speed that was different from the rest of the crowd. It was like a rotating anemometer. In the sky, Qin Guang and the black-armored Mosquito King were fighting fiercely, but he didn't use Mosquito Repent. He had 30 seconds left. He wanted to make use of the time to give the Mosquito King more trouble so that he could use his final strike. If Mosquito Repent attacked the Mosquito King, it would be troublesome. With the speed of the Mosquito King, he couldn't stop it from sucking everyone dry. What was the next stage of the Mosquito King? Forget it. Qin Guang didn't want to imagine. If the gamers were sucked dry, it was fine. If the gods, especially Yu Ting, were sucked dry, the Mosquito King might evolve to the point where it could defeat him. That would be a huge problem. So he either didn't attack, or he had to succeed. Lad, didn't you say there was a 5-second error? Another minute has passed, right? Nothing changed? The hale and hearty old man turned his head to look at the sky, but he couldn't see anything. He chased after the flashing sparks in the sky to capture Qin Guang and the Mosquito King, but it was futile. He couldn't help but complain about the high school student. Just now, the genius high school student had calculated the time so accurately that everyone believed it to be true. Their hearts were in their throats, and there were even all sorts of countdowns. In the end, when the time was up, there was no movement at all. It felt as if they had punched the air with all their might, and it was rather uncomfortable. The genius high school student was also embarrassed. His face had even turned paler. There's a small mistake. Don't worry about the details. Maybe there's a slight error in the timing of the mosquito repellent, or maybe the effect of the mosquito repellent has improved because we've made more mosquito repellents. At this time, the fireball magician stood up and said, "Forget it, let's not stand here and watch the immortals fight. Let's find something to do." Ever since the Sonda coach died, he seemed to have become more proactive. "What are you doing? Scratching that monster with your little flame? Can you keep up?" Poker magician mocked them without holding back. He had always disliked the trio who left the team. The fireball magician saw through him and smiled insincerely as he said, "Oh, why? Your boss is dead, and now you're the one standing up for him? I'm giving a good idea. What's the meaning of your sarcastic tone? Must you quarrel? Aren't you afraid of angering Mr. Dang? We've been in this strange world for a long time, and you still haven't woken up? If that's the case, I suggest you kill yourselves. That way, I won't waste Mr. Dang's energy to take care of you. Or kill you." To everyone's surprise, it was the delicate female elf archer who stood out to calm the situation. With a few words, she silenced the quarreling duo. The fireball magician glanced at the magician and said, "Let's stand by the side of the gods. If the time really comes and Mr. can't kill this black mosquito, we'll block it for as long as we can. It'll be good to buy some time." "It's not necessary. We'll know soon." Peasant used a strange tone and enunciated each word slowly. The onlookers didn't understand, but Peasant wouldn't explain further. She didn't turn her head frantically. Instead, she stared intently at a 30-degree angle in front of her. Everyone followed her gaze and looked forward, but strangely, they couldn't see anything. If they didn't know that Peasant was close to Mr. Dang, they would have mocked her. Peasant didn't stop her time acceleration. She couldn't help but speak, so she thought of an unorthodox method. When she spoke, she dragged her voice 10 times longer. That way, the onlookers wouldn't notice that her time flow was different. They only felt that her tone was strange. Peasant's time flow was different from the onlookers, but Qin Guang and the Mosquito King's time flow was normal. She looked at the outside world as though she was pressing a button that was 10 times slower. She was able to see the movements of Qin Guang and the Mosquito King. Both of them were moving horizontally. They were in the area where Peasant was facing. Peasant didn't need to turn her head. She only needed to move her eyeballs. In Peasant's eyes, Mr. Dang and the black-armored Mosquito King seemed to be fighting without any strategy, but in fact, it was a frenzied fight. At the beginning, Mr. Dang was at a disadvantage. Although he seemed to be stronger, the Mosquito King was not weak either. What was even more ridiculous was that it had a lot of legs, a total of 6. The needle in the Mosquito King's mouth wasn't just for show. The Mosquito King shook its head like a skilled swordsman. It was difficult to deal with. Fortunately, Mr. Dang's moves were exquisite. Otherwise, he would have fallen into the Mosquito King's trap. To Peasant, Mr. Dang was having a hard time. Although he could sneakily punch or kick the Mosquito King from time to time, this guy's black armor provided him with extremely strong defense. The Mosquito King had a shocking recovery speed. Mr. Dang had broken its legs and needle more than once, but the Mosquito King was able to regrow them instantly. Mr. Dang wasn't a normal warrior. He was injured many times by the Mosquito King, but his recovery speed was faster than the Mosquito King's. No, he didn't need to recover. Even when he was pierced by the needle, he didn't retreat. Instead, he took a step forward and punched the Mosquito King. At the same time, he allowed the needle to penetrate his body and use his muscles to break the needle. Peasant didn't understand his intention, but when Qin Guang repeated the action for the 3rd time, she understood. The Mosquito King's needle contained a powerful paralyzing venom. The Mosquito King's venom must be extraordinary. If he allowed the needle to poke into his body, Mr. Dang would not be able to resist the venom of the Mosquito King. His body seemed to be more injured, but in fact he was completely free from the venom. His situation was more advantageous. He was indeed Mr. Dang. If she were the Mosquito King, she would have exploded in anger. It was a pity that there weren't 3 connections beside the needle. She couldn't help but shout at the others because she discovered that Qin Guang, who was Mr. Dang, had changed his tactics. He no longer wrestled with the Mosquito King like before. Instead, he drifted in the air at an extremely fast speed. The Mosquito King desperately chased after him, but Mr. Dang was as slippery as a loach. Every time he got close, he would quickly escape. His body was surrounded by a powerful force that pushed her and the Mosquito King apart. Before she shouted, which was 1 second ago, Qin Guang stopped fleeing. He flipped over and charged at the Mosquito King. The distance between the Mosquito King and the Mosquito King shortened. In the blink of an eye, they were tens of meters apart. The others were puzzled when they heard the muffled sound of thunder in the distant void. The sky, which was originally empty, suddenly shone brightly, as if a ray of multicolored light had lit up in that place. Everyone fixed their eyes on it, only to see layers of clouds behind the multicolored light. The color of the clouds was strange. It wasn't the usual blue sky and white clouds. Instead, it was pitch black. However, it looked brighter under the bright sunlight. The crowd finally saw Mr. Dang and the Mosquito King clearly. The Mosquito King and Mr. Dang were standing proudly in the air, facing each other. Mr. Dang extended his hand forward and came out from the Mosquito King's heart. The Mosquito King's 6 sharp legs stabbed into various parts of Mr. Dang's body. Time seemed to have stopped. It went from extreme motion to extreme stillness. Many people couldn't adapt to it. Did they perish together? Such a terrifying thought appeared in many people's minds. Even Peasant, who had witnessed everything, felt the same way. The distant dark clouds became denser, and the muffled rumbling sounds resembled thunder. However, there was no lightning, only a ray of greenish-gray light emitted from the clouds. In the distance, Qin Guang turned his head slightly to look at the crowd and the celestials behind them. Then, he turned to look at the Mosquito King and said, "Good, you can die now." The 18th form of the 18 mosquitoes subduing palms, repenting mosquitoes. As he shouted, the thick dark clouds behind him suddenly shrank back. At the same time, his palm that penetrated the Mosquito King's heart gradually surged out of the black mist that seemed to have a substance. The black mist was like tree roots tearing through the ground as it spread out from the Mosquito King's body. The black mist cracked like ice wherever it went. The Mosquito King gave a heart-wrenching scream. Its 6 sharp legs, which were full of barbs, struggled violently as though it wanted to tear Qin Guang apart. The syringe in its mouth broke on its own, but in the blink of an eye, it grew back. Although it was shorter than before, it was just enough for it to peck at Qin Guang's face. But its struggle was still in vain. Although it was only 1 palm, it contained all the essence of the previous 17 palm strikes. Qin Guang knew that it had this move, so he had already covered his upper body with the most powerful protective aura. But the Mosquito King's bite caused sparks to fly. After a few seconds, Qin Guang felt that the hidden injuries in the Mosquito King's body had almost exploded. Then he used his left hand to slap its head. With a loud bang, the black-armored Mosquito King's pointed head exploded like a thunderstorm. The divine power of the 20 celestials who had died turned into colorful flowing lights and shot out from the place where the Mosquito King exploded. They flew everywhere in the slaughter world like fireworks. Qin Guang was also covered in injuries from the explosion. His face was unrecognizable as he plummeted from the sky. But before he landed, he endured the pain and adjusted his posture. That's right, I can't hit the ground face first. He also seized every second to swallow the gold sore medicine and use the talent ability of the earth paste exploder. Don't worry about other parts, just protect my face first. My expert image depends on my face. I can't let it be destroyed. Strangely, when the earth paste exploder used its ability, it didn't repair his face as he ordered. Instead, it turned into a terrible black hole and crazily absorbed the various divine powers that were drifting everywhere in the slaughter world or flying to the other celestials who had not died yet. The streams of light formed by the divine power of the god race's projections spun in the air like a river flowing backward. They gathered above Qin Guang's head and turned into a beam of light that fell from the sky. Qin Guang looked up with a blank face. I didn't activate the earth paste exploder's devour talent. What's wrong? The closer the light beam got to Qin Guang, the smaller it became. Finally, it turned into a light beam as thick as a pinky and poured into his forehead. Can I absorb the divine powers of those celestials? Am I going to become a god through the slaughter world? So explosive? No, if I can absorb it, I should have absorbed it when I killed the Titan. What's going on? Mr. Dang, you're back. As Qin Guang was puzzled, Peasant, who was slightly closer, couldn't help but remind him. Qin Guang tried to move his head. It didn't affect the light beam. It just flowed from his forehead to the top of his head. Then he turned his head to look. But why is the back of my anus glowing? A trumpet-shaped light. That's not right. Qin Guang turned his head to look at the sky. He was bewildered. The flowing light from his buttocks was as thick as a pinky. After rushing far away, it dispersed again. A portion of it spread to the entire Colosseum, but another portion flowed back to the celestial projections that had not died yet. Yu Ting, who was further away, had stood up. He had a disgusted expression as he resisted the thunder power that flowed back to his body. But his resistance was futile. The divine power that spurted out from his anus hit his face and then returned to his body. Qin Guang felt his body and didn't feel that the earth paste exploder's talent had become stronger. He didn't understand. What did I absorb? Does this mean that the god power has passed through my body? What's the point? Why did I have to come out from my anus? This old man has an illustrious name. Wait, I seem to have realized something. Previously, I was indeed unable to absorb the divine power of the Titan god, but those virtual gods who had died had been devoured by the mutated giant mosquitoes of the slaughtering world. Then these mosquitoes had stolen and digested their divine power. Of course, this also included the power that Yu Ting and the others had absorbed after being stung. Perhaps the characteristics of the Celestials' divine powers were changed by the mosquitoes, and they were attracted to the earth paste exploder's talent? Was that why this happened? The question was, why did the special characteristics of the divine powers pass through my body? Could it be that I'm the legendary activated charcoal water purifier? Then what the hell did I absorb? Blarg! A distance away, Wethany, who had just managed to stand up, was greedily absorbing the divine powers. She lifted her head and saw Qin Guang's anus blossoming. She clutched her stomach and vomited. Chapter 1182. Yu Ting sighed. Wethany, stop struggling. Just turn your face away. You won't feel anything if you can't see it. Wethany, like Yu Ting, could not resist at all. Poor Wethany. She felt that it would have been better if she had not woken up so quickly. She looked enviously at the other gods who were still in a deep coma. At that moment, the electronic notification finally sounded. Congratulations, player, for successfully completing Mission 5. Reward points will be distributed to all player accounts according to the completion of the mission. Along with this notification, Chen Guang checked his merchant store once more and grinned. He was not sure how many reward points he had obtained for Mission 5, but he had obtained more than 200,000 reward points. Now, he had nearly 300,000 reward points in total. But most importantly, he found that he could finally press the Enhance Ability button in his shop. It was no longer just a decoration. He began to look forward to it. With the old man's current ability, if he wanted to enhance it, what would it be like? Also, after the enhancement, I should be able to purchase exclusive items according to my awakened ability, right? What would it be? Just thinking about it made him look forward to it. What would it be? Chen Guang happily clicked on the ability enhancement button while looking forward to what would happen to his body. As for what he sucked in earlier, he couldn't get it out no matter how hard he tried. Thus, he decided not to bother himself with something that he couldn't find an answer to. At that moment, he was not the only one at a loss. Yu Ting and Wethany, who had just woken up, looked at each other in confusion. The two gods had vomited enough before. In fact, they could only feel nausea and retch. There was nothing in their stomachs that could actually be vomited. But when the two gods carefully checked, they were puzzled to find that there was no change in the divine power that they had regained. It was slightly weaker, but in essence, it had not weakened. It could still be recovered by eating the strange blue pill. It was like a person who had become thin and weak because of long-term malnutrition, but their bones would not change at all. The reason why the divine power had become weak was that part of it had been consumed by the mosquito during the battle. But only the skin had been touched, and the foundation inside had not been touched. But why was it that in this inexplicable game setting, when they were returning to their base after losing their strength? Why did that fellow, when noon, do such a thing? Disgusting. Also, where did the divine power of the other dead gods go? While the two gods were thinking, they also received a notification from the electronic voice. They hurriedly looked at their respective shops, and then their faces fell. Including the reward points that he had received before, Yu Ting now had about 70,000 reward points in his hands. There were still no options for ability enhancement. There were other things that he could buy, but for the Protoss, these were meaningless toys. At the same time, the other Protoss woke up one after another. One by one, they checked their bodies and were overjoyed. Just now, they thought that they were dead for sure, but they never thought that it was just equivalent to a nap. When they woke up, there was nothing wrong with them, and they even picked up 10 or 20,000 reward points for free. Although they did not know what use it was, they would see the light sooner or later, right? On the other hand, many ordinary players have no idea about ability enhancement. The first awakening requires 20 reward points, the second awakening requires a full 2,000 points, and they want the third awakening? The experienced gamers could guess with their toes that it would require 200,000 reward points. The difference was too great, and they could not even count on it. But as they get more and more reward points, especially when the individual stock exceeds 50,000, some mechanism seems to be triggered in the shop, and the options that can be purchased suddenly increase and become strange, overwhelming. Everyone was dazzled by the dense list, which looked like a shopping list in an online shopping mall. Peasant and the genius high school student were talking to different gamers at different places. They were reminding the gamers not to blindly buy items based on their own abilities. They were trying to achieve the highest combat power at the lowest cost. In the fifth wave of the giant mosquito beast battle, the ordinary gamers were only a bystander at the beginning, and they were useless in the later stages. Though Mr. Dang was able to deal with the black-scale mosquito king, He did not have the time to take care of the others. The giant Mosquito King would only become stronger. If they did not strengthen their self-defense capabilities, they would definitely die. In addition, the small group of people had undergone many evolutions, and there had been many changes. The members of the small group had to consider the awakened abilities of their teammates and cooperate with each other when purchasing the items. Just as the crowd was scratching their heads and trying to think of a match, not many people noticed that the Mr. Dang they were talking about had been standing there blankly for more than a few minutes without moving. Even Qin Guang had no idea what was going on. After he pressed on the button, his thoughts came to a complete halt. The reward points were deducted from his shop like the numbers on a slot machine. Finally, after a long time, the 300,000 reward points in Qin Guang's pocket were emptied. That's right, his expenditure wasn't 200,000 reward points. He was left with nothing. After waking up, Qin Guang was bewildered. He checked his shop system to make sure he was not hallucinating. The reward points that he had saved up were all gone. He did not obtain the awakened abilities as he wished. He did not feel anything. Could it be that my shop is a leaky version? Do I not have any special abilities? Are you kidding me? I don't believe it. Qin Guang looked at the gamers equipping themselves with various pieces of sci-fi equipment. He turned his head away silently. Forget it, he had to believe it. Up until now, there were only the most basic items in his shop. He didn't get anything, but look at what others had. The gamer who carried the sniper rifle was sitting in what looked like a light prism tank. He peeked his head out and looked around. It seemed like the entire team was in the tank. The 4 members of Peasant's team were wearing strange, emerald armor. The armor was made of green vines and looked beautiful. It was obviously an elven product. Another girl used her awakened ability, which was to summon a pokeball. At this moment, the girls were surrounding the Kelda duck that she had summoned, teasing it non-stop. On the other side, the warrior, magician, and beast tamer were domineering. The gamer who carried the Esgenos fortress was equipped with armor. The genius high school student and the fat household appliance gamer. Alright, you guys can do it. The fat household appliance guy could only summon household appliances, but he had a special item in his shop. It turned out to be an exoskeleton armor that he wore on his body. This item was so considerate that it even took into account his big belly. I'm envious of you. Qin Guang stared blankly. Fortunately, there were other gamers who were as pitiful as him. That's right, they were the Celestials who had not made any moves. The first 2 awakenings had nothing to do with the Celestials. Perhaps when they exceeded 200,000 reward points, they would be able to use them. Thank you, Noon. Suddenly, Yu Ting walked over with a strange expression on his face. Didn't you want to self-destruct and kill me? I should have spoiled your plans. Why are you thanking me? Qin Guang crossed his arms and ignored Yu Ting. Yes, but no matter what, you saved my life and the lives of the other Celestials. Qin Guang still had a poker face. But I'm not happy. If I had my way, I'd be more than happy to watch you die. Yu Ting didn't say anything more. He turned and walked away. Lord Yu Ting, why did you thank him? Wethany muttered. Yu Ting used a special channel that only the Celestials could hear. To lower his guard. When he's not paying attention, we can attack. Qin Guang looked at the guy's back and couldn't help but mock him. Did you really think I couldn't hear you? Do you think I'm an idiot? Lord Yu Ting, that Noon stared at us as if he wanted to eat us. No, eat the gods. It's okay. He was touched by my kindness. All players, attention. The 6th mission is about to begin. All players, attention. Suddenly, an electronic notification sounded in everyone's mind. This time, whether it was the celestial race or the human race, everyone's expression became extremely serious. The 5th mission, the mosquitoes, was a pleasant surprise. Nobody dared to belittle this massacre mission. 6th mission hint, jump rope, 100 times. The electronic notification sounded again. The gamers looked at each other. What the heck was that? Jump rope? 100 times? As they were puzzled, a new purchasable item appeared in everyone's system shop with a ding sound. Worn-out jump rope will be destroyed after 100 uses. Gosh, it's for real. Mr. Dang, what's going on? The gamers who were prepared for battle were at a loss. Peasant couldn't help but run to Chen Guang's side to ask. The gamers exchanged for the jump rope, but none of them dared to jump. They were worried that something was amiss. Chen Guang said righteously, "Forget it, I'll give it a try." He wanted to exchange for the jump rope, but he discovered that his pocket was empty. He said without batting an eyelid, "Peasant, help me exchange for a jump rope." Peasant didn't know what was going on, but she wouldn't ask about the reward points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. A minute later, as he counted to 100, the skipping rope broke into pieces without any warning. "Mr. Dang, how's it going?" Chen Guang didn't want to tell the gamers. "You might not believe me, but I've completed mission 6. Ah? It's true. How many reward points are there? 50,000? So many. Are there any special instructions? No. Then what's going on? How could it be so easy? God knows. Don't ask me. Forget it, let the others get to work. It's really just skipping 100 times. 3 minutes later, as the gamers and the Celestials completed their respective missions, the notification of the completion of Mission 6 rang in their minds, but a portion of the gamers didn't hear it. Everyone was puzzled. Suddenly, this group of people and the God race suddenly exploded. The people and the God race, who had been laughing and joking just a moment ago, were suddenly at a loss. What's going on? What's going on? The fat electrician looked bewilderedly at the disappearing corpses of his comrades. Beside him was the ghastly genius high school student. When he was jumping, he stopped twice. The gamers who died had the same situation. The genius high school student gritted his teeth and said coldly. The genius high school student gritted his teeth and said coldly. Chen Guang reacted at the same time, and he broke out in cold sweat. The terrifying massacre world had evolved into a trap in the mission description. If the gamers died because of a disagreement, it would be useless to exchange for more equipment. If the gamers were to die, they would die. Then wouldn't the Celestials, on the normal player's side, although most of them had never jumped rope before, they had at least seen it. Moreover, they were in the mission space, so they didn't dare to be careless. Only a small number of people made mistakes because of one reason or another. However, it was different for the Celestials. They clearly treated it as a game. When they were jumping, most of the Celestials were intermittent and didn't take it seriously. Sure enough, when Chen Guang turned around, Yu Ting and Wethany were looking around with pained expressions. Beside them, many virtual Celestials were exploding like balloons. The tragic death of these virtual Celestials was shocking. It was similar to the Hercules who died in Chen Guang's hands. The fragments of their bodies all turned into a semi-solid liquid that was eventually absorbed by the soil of the Colosseum. The divine power that escaped from these death Celestials was not filtered by him. Chen Guang suddenly had an illusion. Maybe this massacre mission didn't want him to do that kind of thing again? Don't let my chrysanthemum bloom? But I don't even know what the benefits are, okay? Also, what about my reward points? What about the 50,000 reward points? I just got them. How did they suddenly disappear? Who stole them? When I wanted to exchange for the jump rope just now, I didn't have any. Does this mean that my awakened ability is the legendary black hole, specifically sucking away my reward points? But where is it sucking away? Attention all players, Mission 7 is about to begin. The Scourge Army is about to arrive. Please survive the attack of Hellfire. While he was at a loss, the mission prompt sounded again. It seemed that after the giant mosquito formation of Mission 5, the pace of the entire massacre world had suddenly increased. Before the sound of the notification faded away, before everyone and the Protoss could recover from the tragic deaths of their companions, a loud rumbling sound came from the sky. Everyone looked up into the sky. In the sky outside the walls of the Colosseum, giant orange-red meteorites were swooping down. Hellfire? It's time to show my real skills. The beast tamer with the long whip calmed himself down and laughed. He looked at his two companions beside him. Fear. My Misha. The Misha great bear that attacks cities. Specialized in dismantling Hellfire. Chapter 1183. Following the beast tamer's roar, A tunnel with a diameter of more than 6 meters appeared beside him, and a dull roar came from the tunnel. In the next moment, a huge bear jumped out of the tunnel. It was the legendary Misha bear. Misha roared at the sky as it landed. Its roar was deafening, suppressing the sound of the meteorites in the sky and the cheers of the NPC audience in the Colosseum. But the proud look on the beast tamer's face froze after 5 seconds because he realized that although his Misha bear was huge, its shape was not quite right. Chen Guang turned his head and could not bear to look anymore. It was too tragic. How can I tell you that this slaughtering world is usually created based on the old man's memory? You, the beast tamer, summoned Misha War Bear, so your class must be Druid. Then, your Misha War Bear must be based on the standards of War 3. Whether it was its size, attack type, or appearance, it should be in line with the settings in War 3. Therefore, the 3D model of the legendary War 3 engine appeared in front of everyone. This Misha looked miserable. Its appearance and sound effects were not in the same dimension at all. Its limbs and shoulders looked like pointy polygons. The funniest thing was its head, which was a large trapezoid with 2 conical ears. Chen Guang held back his laughter. He thought that his Dota Tower was much better than War 3. Since there was already a Misha War Bear, there was no reason for the Hellfire from War 3 to appear. Then these Hellfires were most likely not the characteristics of War 3. They should be based on the Dota Tower. He decided to kindly remind them, when the Hellfire lands, everyone pay attention to stand far away, and be sure to completely avoid the circle of this thing when it lands. If I'm not mistaken, when the Hellfire hits the ground, there will be a special effect of dizziness. Also, the Hellfire should not be affected by siege attacks. The beast tamer hurriedly explained, I'm just joking. Chen Guang said, but if anyone has an attack that can eliminate mana loss, you can try it. Well, has anyone played Dota Tower before? It's the kind of scattered mana orb that anti-mage uses in the game. Every time you hit it, it's called mana shave. The female elven archer raised her hand. Me. I have devil-piercing arrows. Chen Guang snapped his fingers twice. Awesome. The hale and hearty old man's team was in an awkward position. What the hell was this mana reduction? We had the Apocalypse tank, and the game versions were different. One was magic, and the other was sci-fi. How are we supposed to fight happily? The Apocalypse tank looked awesome, but if it was hit head-on by a Hellfire meteor, everyone would probably be turned into sky lanterns. Everyone hurriedly got out again, and tens of thousands of reward points were wasted. Not long after, accompanied by a loud bang, the first Hellfire meteor crashed into the Colosseum. He didn't know what material the meteorite was made of. It was about 4 to 5 meters in diameter. Looking at its flying speed, it would at least create a huge crater like a real meteorite when it hit the ground. But in fact, although this thing shook the ground when it hit, it was much lighter than ordinary people thought. It didn't even create a crater. At the moment of landing, there seemed to be a magic circle about 10 meters in diameter flashing. It was unknown if this magic circle had offset the impact. Isn't this Hellfire powerful? Someone in the crowd suddenly said this, and the next moment, the stone that had just hit the ground rolled forward on its own. After rolling for less than a round, the round stone disintegrated on its own, stretched out its limbs, and a giant stone man about 6 meters tall appeared in front of everyone. This stone man was covered in blue-red flames, and people could feel the heat wave even from so far away. Mr. Dang, what kind of stun effect are you talking about? While everyone was watching, someone in the crowd suddenly asked. Chen Guang ignored him and looked back at the meteorites that were falling one after another. This was just the beginning, but there were still countless meteors in the sky. This was too dense. If the magic circle produced when each Hellfire landed was so big, then it was impossible for people to completely avoid the coverage of the magic circle. As expected, it didn't take long for the Hellfire meteorites to fall from the sky like raindrops. At first, people could still dodge, but as time passed, the meteorites became denser, and finally, there was no way to avoid them. The first person to be covered by the magic circle when the Hellfire landed was the electrical appliance Fatty. The poor fat guy couldn't run easily with his big belly, so he suddenly staggered and fell to the ground. When he wanted to get up, it was already too late. His whole body was covered by the magic circle, and he screamed in pain inside the magic circle. As the magic array took shape, his screams came to an abrupt end. After another second, in a short interval, he crawled up and shouted, "There really is a stun effect. I can't move at all." Before he finished speaking, another meteorite fell not far from him, and the magic circle that appeared on the ground covered him again. This time, the control time of the Hellfire meteorite was just perfect. "I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Save me. Save me." After another second, the electrical appliance Fatty screamed in despair, but this was his last call for help. Ever since then, every time a meteorite fell, another one would immediately follow, leaving no space for him at all. The legendary seamless skill? Die from dizziness? However, no one had the time to care about him at this moment. Ordinary players were succumbing one after another, and everyone couldn't even take care of themselves. Only Qin Guang had it a little easier. He relied on his fast movement technique and reaction speed to wander around. However, he didn't dare to step into the range of the magic array. If he was careless and got stunned as well, he'd be finished. At this time, Qin Guang was looking at the Protoss with a gloomy face. Faced with this situation, what else could he say? The giant mosquito circle in Mission 5 was targeted at the Protoss. This was something that everyone realized after a while. But now, this Mission 7 was undoubtedly targeted at the ordinary players, but the bias of the massacre quest was too obvious. The place where the Protoss stayed was like a clear sky. Not a single meteorite approached that side. From the beginning, the meteorites had been on the side of the ordinary players. In addition, Yu Ting and the others were walking around casually. It was strange that no matter where they went, there would be no Hellfire meteorites. This scene was very much like a miracle that people often saw. One end of the street was raining cats and dogs, while the other end was clear. Looking at the brazen Hellfire meteorites in the sky, Qin Guang shrugged. "Can you be any more obvious?" On this end, more and more ordinary players were stunned by the Hellfire meteorite magic circle. Everyone thought they were dead for sure. Finally, a meteor smashed towards Asenath, who was wearing heavy armor. However, he was in a stunned state and had no way to avoid it. He thought to himself, "I'm really dying unjustly." Looking at the big guy coming toward him, this guy's face was ashen. Finally, under the panicked and frightened gazes of the crowd, or under the interested gazes of the god race, the meteorite hit the brawny man's head head-on. Feeling the scorching heat wave on his face, he thought he was dead for sure. Everyone else thought he was dead for sure too. But after a short sound, the meteorite rolled half a circle forward and turned into a stone giant covered in flames. It turned around and waved its stone fist, trying to hit him. If he guessed correctly, this was probably the special attack of Hellfire, Fist of Flames. But it didn't manage to hit it, because the magic circle produced when the next Hellfire meteorite landed had stunned it as well. This stun effect didn't differentiate between friend and foe. The strong man who should have been smashed into a meat patty stood there blankly. Other than his face looking a little flushed from overheating, he was actually unharmed. This scene left everyone at a loss. Only Qin Guang knew that he hadn't guessed wrong. It was indeed the ultimate move of the warlock in the Sword Tower, summoning Hellfire. The skill description of Hellfire was like this. When it smashed down, enemies within the magic circle would be stunned for a second, ignoring magic immunity. But no damage would be done. Even if the body was completely smashed, there wouldn't be any HP loss. The real damage was the Fist of Flames that came out after the Hellfire landed, and the permanent sacrifice effect brought by the flames on the surface of the Hellfire giant's body. Obviously, the massacre mission forcefully copied the settings in the Sword Tower, even if this setting was hard to understand and unreasonable. But the strong warrior didn't feel proud for long. Although the Hellfire stone man in front of him couldn't swing its Fist of Flames down because of the constant dizziness, the guy still felt unbearably hot. He was very uncomfortable being roasted by the flames of the eternal sacrifice. Although there was no HP bar on his head, he knew that his physiological functions were constantly declining. The other gamers who were stunned from the start were in a similar situation. As more and more Hellfire Stone men stood around them, the heat from the eternal sacrifice became more intense, and they felt more uncomfortable. Other than that, although the rock golem's movements were constantly interrupted, they were slightly more resistant to the stun effect than the players. The Flame Fist's completion rate was advancing bit by bit, and there would always be a moment when their fists would hit someone. According to the settings of the Sword Tower game, the Fist of the Stone Men was extremely powerful, and the gamers wouldn't be able to withstand the blows. Peasant and her companions were in the most difficult situation. They had spent most of their reward points on the rattan armor, but the rattan armor didn't have any resistance against the fire damage. Instead, it caused the damage to increase. In less than 30 seconds, the number of stone golems around the four of them did not exceed 3, but their rattan armors had already begun to ignite with flames. Qin Guang was helpless. He had to save them. He could only take the risk of approaching Peasant and his companions. He wanted to see if he could withstand the dizziness. As he approached, he tried to put half of his foot into the mana formation of the Hellfire Stone. Then he was immobilized. It was indeed a dizziness that disregarded mana resistance. It was unreasonable. The meteorites that fell from the sky seemed to have spirituality. When Qin Guang was immobilized, the meteorites in the sky immediately changed direction and converged in Qin Guang's direction. Within a minute, Qin Guang's surroundings were filled with Hellfire Stone men. It was a pity that they were all stone men. Moreover, the temperature around Qin Guang was getting higher. The scorching flames struck his body, causing his stamina to deplete rapidly. What's worse is that at this time, his reward points have been completely emptied to nothing. He can't refine a small pill, or even if he does, he can't put it into his mouth. Muffled groans were heard from afar. The female elf archer couldn't hold on any longer before Qin Guang. The beast tamer's polygonal Misha war bear raised its head angrily, but it was useless. It couldn't even swing its claws, let alone the fact that the special effect of its siege attack was useless. Everyone had yet to recover from the giant mosquito formation in Mission 5, and they had yet to recover from the extremely sinister Mission 6. In the blink of an eye, they had entered an even more dangerous situation. In a few more minutes, no matter how the Hellfire Stone Giant's movements were interrupted, it would still land its fiery fists on them. When that happened, everyone would be surrounded by stone golems. There wouldn't even be a place for them to stand. All the players, including Qin Guang, were thinking that Mission 5 was a test to see if the normal players could save the Protoss. Mission 7 was a test to see if the Protoss could save the normal humans. In the 5th mission, the normal players were a burden, but with the strength of Mr. Dang, it could be said that he had barely passed the mission. But now, could they count on the Protoss? Would they be grateful for Mr. Dang's help? At that moment, those who could still look in the direction of the Protoss couldn't help but look at them. Then, they saw a scene that infuriated them. At this moment, Qin Guang's lungs were about to explode. Not long ago, Yu Ting had come to thank him. Perhaps because he wanted to ease the tension between them, he sat on the ground and looked at the players from time to time. Not only did they not want to help, but they also looked at the players with evil intentions. Yu Ting, you ungrateful Protoss scum. Qin Guang gritted his teeth. If he had known that this would happen, he would have turned around and killed the Mosquito King. While Qin Guang was cursing in his heart, the Pantheon suddenly moved and tried to find out where the normal players were. Then, something unbelievable happened. The extremely biased Killing World had already locked the normal players in place, but as the Protoss moved closer, the Protoss let go of those who were already under its control. The Hellfire spell formation did not apply the stun effect, and the normal players and the Hellfire Stone Giants were freed. The players with fast reflexes or strong defense took the opportunity to escape. Some forcefully endured the Flaming Fist and turned to run. More than 20 Protoss followed these mortals, protecting them all the way out of the Hellfire Meteorite's range of control. Only a very small number of players died tragically under the Flaming Fists because of exhaustion, slow speed, or low defense, or simply could not withstand the burning of the eternal sacrifice. But in short, most of the ordinary players were out of danger under the protection of the Protoss, who were almost one-on-one. Seeing this, Qin Guang felt a little relieved and gave Yu Ting a look of approval. Yu Ting met his gaze and smiled meaningfully. About 5 or 6 minutes later, Chen Guang could no longer see the outside world. He was surrounded by red hellfire stone giants. Meteors continued to fall from the sky, filling up every inch of space around him. Chen Guang was confused. He looked up at the sky and realized that the hellfire meteorites were flying in a straight line. Other than around him, the meteorites had completely avoided the other areas of the Colosseum. Chen Guang finally understood Yu Ting's plot. He was using the advantage of the hidden rules of the 7th mission to have the Protoss spread throughout the Colosseum. On one hand, it was to protect the other normal players and reduce casualties. After all, there were still 2 more missions. On the other hand, the more the Protoss spread out, the more hellfire meteorites would fall on him. Chen Guang cursed in his heart. This ingrate wanted to control him seamlessly until he died? After a while, peasants' shout came from outside. "Mr. Dang, be careful. We are being controlled by the Protoss. They want to kill you." As expected, if it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't speak, Chen Guang really wanted to greet Yu Ting with vulgarities. "I'm your grandpa NPC, I'm your protector, and this is how you repay me?" The massacre world was really messing with him. They made it seem like he had to save Yu Ting and the other Protoss gods, yet they were so hostile towards him. How could they do this to him? Perhaps if he died, the Protoss would not be able to complete the massacre mission. However, they would only lose a projection, while he would die. Hence, they were in an invincible position. What should he do now? Wait for death? Chen Guang tried to use the true martial divine skill, but it was to no avail. He tried to use the Earthburner's innate ability, but it was to no avail. The stun effect that ignored mana immunity was just that powerful. Not long after, the first stone golem's fist landed on Chen Guang's face. However, due to the stun effect, the fiery fist was not heavy. Chen Guang was not sent flying, but half of his body was stuck to the fist. Fine, I might as well be sent flying, Chen Guang thought. What fiery fist? Isn't this a frying pan for pancakes? Did I take a punch, or am I being tortured by the enhanced version of eternal sacrifice? When will this matter come to an end? Chen Guang looked up at the sky. The dense string of hellfire meteorites was endless. Only God knew how long it would take. "Dang Wu, I'm sorry." Yu Ting's voice finally came from outside. He did not sound proud, but rather ashamed. Chen Guang felt that he was hypocritical and pretentious. As the protective aura decreased, half of his body became hotter and hotter. Am I really going to die here? Chen Guang didn't believe it. First of all, this was the world in Cup. There was no reason he would be burned alive so easily. Secondly, even if he was burned to death, the world in Cup could at least give him a chance to revive, right? Moreover, although the force stun could freeze the talent ability of the Earth Paste Exploder, it could not burn the talent ability away. Hellfire was an elemental creature composed of earth and fire elements. Although its level was not low, it was still far from the God Emperor level Earthburner. Chen Guang complained to himself, "I'm not afraid of death, but cooking one side is annoying." Just as he was complaining, another fist finally landed on his back from behind. Good, now both sides are at the same temperature. I'm cooked. Chen Guang felt that after the 7th mission was over, he could only vent the hatred in his heart by frying Yu Ting alive. However, after the incident at the giant mosquito formation, he felt that he could not kill Yu Ting personally. It was best to think of a way to let the gods die at the hands of the magical beasts. However, it was difficult to do that. AI, it's so hot. I can smell the burnt smell in my nose. Forget it, maybe my nose is burnt. Fortunately, the stone golems are densely packed, so no one can see my terrible state. He secretly rejoiced. However, someone didn't think so. Peasant, who was being held by Wethany intimately, touched her eyelashes without batting an eyelash. Just now, she estimated that she would not be able to capture what was inside, so she turned her face elsewhere. She tried to communicate with the others with her eyes to think of a way to save Mr. Dang. However, a side mission notification appeared in her mind. It required her to maintain her filming state to repay the huge reward points loan. This might even affect her reward points credit record. What the heck is credit record? I'm buying an hourglass, not a house with a mortgage. Chapter 1184. That was why Chen Guang thought he wasn't seen, but everything that happened to him was captured by peasant's eyelash camera. Lord Yu Ting, are we really not going to save him? In the center of the Protoss camp, Vesini turned her head and asked Divine Emperor Yu Ting, who was beside her, as if the matter had nothing to do with her. Yu Ting nodded expressionlessly. It's enough to save the mortals. As for him, I hope he dies quickly. If he dies, will our mission be over? Will it be that easy? Vesini asked again. Yu Ting grinned. He couldn't help but recall his time in the Endless Divinity. Originally, he was traveling in the lower realm that he had personally created to comprehend the true meaning of the gods and catch up to the footsteps of his friend who had already passed away. However, he suddenly felt an irresistible will ordering him to participate in this so-called game. In this game, he had to do everything he could to stop an existence from achieving his goal. Of course, the best outcome would be to completely kill him in this game world. This will came too suddenly and violently. Even a divine emperor like him couldn't defend against it. It came without a sound, and it was even stronger than the will of a divine god. Then this will transmitted more consciousness to him. It told him that it represented the source of the endless divinity. The task he was leading the advance party to protect the stability of the endless divinity. The gods had to fight against the most vicious devil in the history of the endless divinity. It was more sinister and terrifying than the devil that caused the death of 2 divine gods and the collapse of the divine world. This represented the will of the endless divinity. Yu Ting couldn't resist it, so he retracted his will and prepared for battle. At first, he was worried that things would be too complicated. He did not expect that the big boss would expose himself so openly in front of him. It was a pity that all the gods in the advance party were suppressed. He was the only one who could use his divine power, but he was still no match for the big boss. He thought this was a simple test. He didn't expect such a good opportunity to appear in the 9 massacre missions. Even if they could only kill him once, at least they could understand how he died, how he resurrected, and what the truth of the gods' game was. Yu Ting was silent. He continued to stare in the direction where Chen Guang was surrounded. Although his eyes couldn't see through the Hellfire Stone Golem's wrapping, he could sense that the life force inside was weakening. Would Dangwu really die? Yu Ting even had the illusion that things would be so easy. There was a strong feeling of unreality in his heart. The essence will of the endless god realm had personally issued an order, and it was likely that all of the gods in the god realm would be required to participate in this battle. And yet, the opponent was so weak. This was truly inconceivable. Tell everyone to be careful. Although these so-called Hellfire Elemental Giants aren't high-level, we're still very weak. Although the rules favor us and we can avoid the stun effect, the power of this fiery fist isn't to be underestimated. Yu Ting and Vesini gave their orders and leaped to the side, just in time to dodge a Hellfire Giant's fist. The scarlet-green flame drifted to his body, burning a hole in his novice combat uniform. Yu Ting's entire body flickered with electricity as he changed into a set of pure white thunder armor. He was probably a perfectionist. In other parts of the Colosseum, the normal players were on full alert as they ran for their lives, not giving the few Hellfire Golems any chance to even touch the corner of their clothes. But if they got a little closer, the burning sensation from the eternal sacrifice effect would be unbearable. Misha, the war bear that was known for its thick skin and strong enough to attack cities, was roaring in pain as it slapped a Hellfire Stone Golem to death. The 2 of them struck one after another, but Misha Warbear's paw could only scratch off some stone dregs on the Hellfire Stone Giant's body, but Hellfire's raging flame fist left a scar on Misha Warbear's body. The beast tamer's left hand flashed with a green light, and a wave of healing was cast on Misha's body. He waved his whip with his right hand, but it was useless against the Hellfire. Although he couldn't kill the Hellfire he was facing in a short period of time, he at least managed to stall one. On the other hand, the magic archer's performance was particularly eye-catching. Dark blue magic arrows flew out from the elven bow in her hands, nailing into the body of the Hellfire that was chasing after her relentlessly. Each arrow was about the length of an arm. After nailing into the Hellfire's body, they didn't dissipate as quickly as the magic arrows from before. Instead, a spiderweb-like blue crack spread outwards from the point of impact. Wherever these cracks passed, green smoke rose, and the surface of the cracks shone like a galaxy. The crack that spread out from each arrow had to cover an area of at least a meter in diameter before it would slowly heal, and the magic arrows that nailed into the Hellfire's body would dissipate like stardust. This was the special effect of the magic archer's devil-piercing arrow. Its effect was similar to the mana dissipation effect used in the Sword Tower, perhaps even better. After shooting 3 arrows in a row, the magic archer turned around and ran in another direction. A cold shout came from behind her. "Mortal, I've said it before. You can't stray too far from me. Otherwise, I'll kill you." The archer's footsteps paused helplessly, then she changed direction. Previously, she was actually heading straight for the center of the Colosseum, but unfortunately, she was discovered. The number of Hellfires on the periphery was decreasing, and no one knew what kind of mysterious attraction Mr. Donkey had towards the Hellfire, or if the scattered Protoss had an inexplicable repulsive force towards the Hellfire. They had even figured out the range of their repulsive force towards the Hellfire, and through exquisite positioning, they continuously compressed the space in which the Hellfire could move. In the end, there was only one result, and that was to converge towards the center. With their lives on the line, everyone wanted to help Qin Guang, but they couldn't. All they could do was think of ways to intercept 1 or 2 Hellfires, and see if they could relieve the pressure on Mr. Donkey. Everyone knew that Donkey wasn't dead yet. As long as the system notification hadn't come, then Donkey was definitely still alive. The Protoss won't let us help him, and the countless Hellfires there have already turned into a sea of fire. There's nothing we can do even if we go. In that case, we can at least try to do something within our own limits, right? Even if we can only restrain 1 Hellfire, it should at least be a drop in the bucket, right? The Protoss felt that these people's actions were laughable. Right now, there were at least 1,000 Hellfires in the Colosseum, and most of them were surrounding Donkey. So what if you can restrain 20 or 30 of them? Can you change Donkey's situation? Your actions are meaningless. Lord Yu Ting, it looks like we can let these mortals go, right? They can't do anything to these Hellfires at all, so we might as well let them die. A Protoss in the distance asked in a clear voice. He didn't understand why Yu Ting wanted to protect these mortals. Although they had heard that it was the leader of the mortals, Donkey, who had saved them during the previous mission to deal with the mosquitoes, not many Protoss were truly grateful. First of all, they weren't here with their real bodies, but projections. Although death was a heavy loss, it wasn't unacceptable. Comparing the two, they felt that the dignity of the Protoss was more important. In addition, it was natural for mortals to sacrifice themselves for the Protoss, but there was no need for the Protoss to thank them. It was the same logic as how mortals would never say thank you to pigs, cows, sheep, chickens, ducks, or fish. I've said it before. My decision is final, and no one is allowed to question it. Yu Ting only coldly replied him with one sentence. In the 5th mission, if we weren't mortals, our projections would have died a long time ago. It's the same now. Donkey might not die, and in the final 8 and 9 missions, we might not be able to escape unscathed. Just like this time's Hellfire, the killing side of the mission is very obvious. The mosquitoes also caused us to lose half of our members, but the ordinary players are all safe and sound. This isn't a mission that can be dealt with purely based on strength. Perhaps we have to make use of all the conditions that we can in order to meet the requirements of the mission. Lord Yu Ting doesn't want the tragedy of the 5th mission to happen again. The gods, who were listening attentively, nodded. As Yu Ting's mouthpiece, Wethany explained things very clearly. Yu Ting finally added, "Perhaps this will be a long and drawn-out war. We should cherish our projection and keep it. Then, as the advance party, we'll be able to establish a foundation in this game. This is our mission. The will of the God realm has chosen us. If we fail completely, our true bodies might be abandoned by the will of the God realm." The gods were instantly speechless. Yu Ting had spoken the deepest worry in everyone's hearts. When they sensed this mission, None of the gods, including Yu Ting, had the right to reject it. Once the time was up, they were forcefully sent in. If it was just losing a projection, it would be acceptable. But if they were abandoned by the will of the god realm, what awaited their true bodies was unimaginable. You bastards! I don't care what reason you have. I'll definitely go and help you. Just then, a roar came from not far from the center of the Colosseum. It was the muscular man with the shield, Asenath, who had lost control. He ignored the threat of the god beside him, raised his giant shield and charged forward. As he charged, his giant shield flashed, and a 2-meter-tall, green-faced, fanged orc head appeared. It was a pity that Qin Guang could not see it, or he would have given the orc head a fright. It was the head of the legendary orc warrior, Hellscream Grom. The muscular man did not care about the god chasing after him, charging forward in a straight line. The head of Grom roared and crashed into the hellfire in front of him. Although it did not cause any actual damage to the hellfire, it easily knocked it away. Stop him. Take him under control. Stop playing around. Yu Ting furrowed his brows and urged. The black-haired god behind the muscular man suddenly sped up, pouncing behind the muscular man like a ghost. But the muscular man suddenly turned around, his lightsaber slashing horizontally as he shouted, "Eat my heroic strike." Heroic strike? You're making me laugh. The black-haired god, who was known for his speed, tilted his body slightly and aimed for the warrior's neck with his 5 fingers. Unexpectedly, the brawny man roared fiercely, "Bastard grandson gave birth to sons without assholes." The black-haired Protoss knew that he was cursing, but he didn't take it seriously. Just as he was about to grab him by the neck, he suddenly lost control of his arm. Even his mood was affected, and all he wanted to do was punch him hard. With a loud bang, the black-haired god's fist landed on the muscular man's chest. The muscular man staggered, but he used the force of the god's punch to turn and run. A veteran player of World of Warcraft would have recognized that the warrior had used another skill called Taunt. But this time, before he could even take 2 steps, the enraged black-haired Protoss caught up to him. The black-haired Protoss slapped him hard on the back of the head, causing him to fall to the ground. Then, the Protoss dragged him back before he could be hit by Hellfire's flame fist. He had no choice as his skills were all on cooldown. "Peasant, what should we do?" The magical archer lost count of the number of arrows she had shot. Finally, she destroyed the hellfire in front of her. She was exhausted, and her body was unable to withstand the continuous shooting of devil-piercing arrows. She turned her head and asked Peasant, who was staring intently at the center of the Colosseum. Peasant's mind raced, but he couldn't do anything. "I don't know." She had no good solution. Her time manipulation ability was useless in such a situation. Even if she could escape the control of the gods temporarily, it was meaningless. She couldn't rush in and help. At this moment, Qin Guang knew that he couldn't rely on anyone else. Furthermore, he was a little hungry right now. Unknowingly, he was cooked. But he wasn't dead yet. When the damage was accumulated to a certain extent, the Earth Miner's regeneration endowment was fully activated. He was able to withstand the burning of the flaming fist and eternal sacrifice when he became a pancake. It was just that this feeling was too unbearable. It would be better to just die. Just as he was at his wit's end, he felt his body lighten. He lifted his head and saw that there was no longer a meteor shower in the sky. All the hellfire had descended. This was bad news, as it meant that all of the opponents had arrived. But it was also good news, as it meant that the stun effect was over. Just as he was showing off, he suddenly felt that this piece of cooked meat was being squeezed in from all directions. He was no longer in the stun effect, and so were the hellfire around him. There were at least 5 hellfires that had been pressing their fists against his body. Now that the dizziness effect had been completely lifted, the 5 hellfires that were charging at the very front erupted with their terrifying strength. There was a crisp sizzling sound. The pitiful Qin Guang was being squeezed into minced meat. The Earth Miner's elemental core was exposed. The strongest hellfire fists were at the front, and their stone fists were the first to strike the Earth Miner's elemental core. Chapter 1185. Yu Ting, who had been looking inside with anticipation, suddenly changed his expression, revealing a look of incomparable astonishment. His face was full of disbelief. "Lord Yu Ting, what's wrong?" Vesani asked doubtfully from a short distance away. Yu Ting shook his head. "It's strange, very strange." "Strange?" Vesani didn't understand what Yu Ting meant. Yu Ting pressed his right hand down. "You'll know the answer soon enough." As soon as Yu Ting finished speaking, the Colosseum shook violently. A formless shockwave surged out from within, sweeping through the minds of all the Protoss present. The mortals didn't know what was happening, but the Protoss felt it very clearly. Vasani was the first to cry out. "An elemental creature? How can there be such a powerful elemental creature? This doesn't make sense. I've been to the Nilgard Highlands, the home of the wind elemental creatures. I've also been to the Fitten Abyss, the home of the fire elemental creatures. I've also been to the Aesleys Swamp, the holy land of the earth elemental creatures, but I've never seen such pure elemental power. This is a God Emperor elemental creature." A god race member who wasn't very tall couldn't help but shout out. The other gods looked at him, knowing that he wasn't joking. Perhaps this god wasn't as strong as Yu Ting, but he was a famous wandering god in the endless realm of the gods. He never stayed in one place, always wandering. His dream was to travel to every corner of the endless realm of the gods. Of course, according to his own words, this was a dream that could not be fulfilled. If he hadn't seen a God Emperor elemental creature, it was impossible for the others to. "Lord Yu Ting, isn't the biggest difference between elemental creatures and us because their divinity is flawed and they can never reach the God Emperor level?" Vasani asked. Yu Ting shook his head. "We can't imagine how vast the endless realm of the gods is. Even the overgods don't dare say they know all of its secrets. It's not impossible for a God Emperor elemental creature to appear. We just don't know about it. What's more, we're facing a situation that even the origin will of the divine realm is very concerned about. He's our greatest enemy in this game, as well as our ultimate test. I'm surprised that this has happened, but I think it's only natural." Ordinary players could not understand what the Protoss were saying. The Protoss used the celestial language that only the gods could understand. But everyone knew that something unimaginable must have happened inside. At this moment, everyone's attention was focused on the man who was surrounded by countless hellfire. Well, to be precise, he had turned into a man. However, he was trying to figure out the Protoss words. Don't ask him why he could understand it. He didn't know either. This was probably a function that came with becoming a God Emperor level elemental creature. However, it was also possible that he had mastered too many languages in the Language Master Cup and was very good at communication. After becoming the strongest god of shady transactions, he came with the function of simultaneous translation. Of course, it was also possible that the spherical idol representing the Language Master in the Cloud City Cup itself represented the calculation of the Protoss language. As Chen Guang comfortably absorbed the fire and earth elemental energy from the hellfire in front of him, he pondered. From what they said, it seemed that elemental creatures could not reach the God Emperor level. Such a simple principle should be common knowledge in the divine realm, just like how the earth is round and the earth revolves around the sun. But it didn't work for me from the start? Am I too awesome? Or is the heavenly Holy Grail too awesome? Why didn't Lori look surprised at all? Could it be that this Yu Ting is too ignorant and doesn't know what's good for him? Lori's father is a god of chaos. As the legendary second generation of the gods, she knows more secrets? Forget it, that's not important anymore. What's important is that I should quickly absorb the hellfire. Chen Guang took a deep breath. All right, he couldn't breathe either. His physical body had already been burned away, leaving only his elemental core. He might as well transform into the legendary cleaning robot that had the effect of a vacuum cleaner and start absorbing the hellfire madly. The hellfire, which had been astonishingly powerful just a moment ago, had now become a soft little sheep that knelt on the ground powerlessly. The flames surrounding its body quickly dimmed, and the magma-like liquid on the surface of its body quickly solidified and turned to ash. The natural elemental counter made the hellfire's arrogance become a dream. Perhaps, compared to ordinary elemental creatures, the Hellfire's level was not considered low. It even had special skills such as permanent sacrifice, flaming fist, and a certain degree of automatic health recovery. However, in the face of the Earth Exploder's level suppression, the combination of the fire and earth elemental energy made it unable to resist at all. The earth elemental energy was directly absorbed by Qin Guang, while the fire elemental energy was scattered and completely restored to its most basic form. The Hellfire half knelt on the ground and felt the strength in its body rapidly being sucked out. Its joints were quickly solidifying, and it roared in despair. It was unknown whether it felt fear or not. However, it soon relaxed a little, because the other Hellfire's fist was also placed on Qin Guang's elemental ball. The Hellfire duo had appeared. Then came the trio, the 4 heavenly kings, and the 5 golden flowers. They knelt in a circle around Qin Guang. The Hellfire behind looked at its comrade in confusion, not knowing what was happening. It curiously placed its flaming fist on its comrade kneeling in front of it. Then, it also fell into a state of stiffness, as if it was stuck to a high-voltage electric current. It was similar to how Shuzhu, who cultivated the Dark North divine art, would inexplicably lose control and suck in countless experts at the same time. More and more Hellfires were pushed forward by the rules of the slaughtering world. As for the second circle of Hellfires around Qin Guang, they also did not know what was going on with their comrade in front of them. Although they were powerful, they lacked intelligence. They could only rely on their instincts to move, and at the same time, they were also restricted by the rules. Not long after, at least a few hundred Hellfires around Qin Guang joined together and knelt down. Then more and more of them spread out like a wave. Under the shocked gazes of all the Protoss players and the confused gazes of all the ordinary players, the arrogant Hellfire knelt down in a neat row. They no longer had the power they had before. Instead, they looked like a pile of smoking rocks after a volcanic eruption. We can't continue like this. Yu Ting suddenly changed his mind. Everyone, attack and kill the Hellfire. Yu Ting shouted loudly. The gods didn't obstruct the ordinary players around them. Instead, they charged towards the innermost circle. It was obvious that the God Emperor-level elemental creature that Dang Wu had transformed into possessed a unique advantage in rank suppression. If he wasn't stopped, all of the Hellfire would become his nourishment. The gods gathered in the center circle from all directions and used their divine powers. The Hellfire, which had lost its ability to resist due to the Dark North divine skill of the Earthworm Exploder, couldn't withstand the attacks coming from behind. Even the delicate Weathany glowed as she jumped onto the back of the Hellfire and stomped heavily. The ordinary gamers wanted to charge in and steal the Hellfire. However, after the gods left, the scattered Hellfire that surrounded them charged at them again. The gamers had no choice but to fight. At the same time, they looked at the center circle, envious of the gods who were killing the Hellfire like they were chopping vegetables. Peasant dodged nimbly while being chased by a Hellfire. Her gaze never left the center circle. She felt that the Hellfire in front of her was moving very slowly, as though it was restricted by the rules. It looked like it was immersed in a swamp. How was Mr. Dang Wu doing? As a cameraman, it felt terrible not being able to see his own footage. On the other hand, Qin Guang, who was in the Hellfire, was happily enjoying his meal and thinking about how many benefits he could obtain with his innate ability. However, he saw that the Protoss had actually come to steal the kill. He was furious. When the old man was in trouble, the gods watched from the sidelines. Now that the old man was about to make a fortune, the gods came to cause trouble? Why were the gods getting more and more annoyed? Qin Guang had an idea. He temporarily stopped using the Earthworm Exploder's natural ability. Hellfire, who had already lost the ability to resist, was suddenly freed. He turned around and faced the Protoss, who was chopping melons and vegetables, and used Old Fist to serve him. Yu Ting and the other gods were caught off guard. The stronger ones dodged in time, but the weaker ones were hit by the fiery fist. They screamed in pain and flew backward, their bodies emitting flames. A woman in a white robe rushed out of the Protoss camp and used all kinds of great light healing magic on her comrade who was on the ground. When the gods were mostly driven away, Chen Guang activated his natural ability again and continued to suck the hellfire to his heart's content. He wasn't in a hurry to recover his body. First, he was surrounded by hellfire. God knew how many eternal sacrifice effects there were around him. His body would probably be roasted the moment he came out. Second, he realized that the earthworm exploder's natural ability was best to use the elemental core and hellfire. After a while, the deities charged at him again with unwillingness in their hearts. Chen Guang used the same trick again. Unfortunately, he couldn't speak now. Otherwise, he would have scolded the gods for overestimating themselves. You guys should just watch the show properly. Don't come and make trouble for me, okay? Time flew. Half an hour had passed. At this time, in the center of the Colosseum, hundreds of hellfire were piled up. These stone golems had already turned back into round stones. They were smoking and lifeless. Even so, when the gods approached and tried to kill them, these stones would instantly turn back into stone golems. There was even a relatively weak god who couldn't retreat in time because he was too headstrong. He was surrounded by countless hellfire and killed. Of course, Yu Ting knew that Dang Wu was behind this, but he wasn't in any position to blame him. Both sides were in a delicate balance. At the beginning, when Dang Wu seemed to be in danger, the gods were also eager for him to die. When the 7th mission was over, he would be thanking the heavens if he didn't attack the gods first. Finally, with a roar, all the stone golems exploded at the same time. An endless cloud of dust rose into the sky. Then, it quickly turned into ions and dissipated in the void. Dang Wu's figure gradually appeared. He floated out of the dust, wearing a rock-like armor. Chen Guang broke out in a cold sweat. He was too immersed in the pleasure of showing off. He forgot about his clothes and almost flew out. Fortunately, he realized something was wrong halfway through. He immediately used the extra earth elemental energy to form this armor. It looked a bit ugly, but it was just enough to cover his embarrassment. Yu Ting, I'm warning you. This is your last chance. If there's a next time, don't blame me for attacking first. Chen Guang looked down at Yu Ting coldly. He was extremely unhappy. This guy's white thunder armor looked better than mine. Yu Ting pretended to be confused. I don't understand what you mean. It doesn't matter if you understand it or not. As long as everyone knows it. Chen Guang snorted and floated away. Chapter 1186. After Chen Guang was done, the other scattered infernals in the Colosseum didn't last long either. In this Quest 7, although the Protoss had the advantage of the rules, they didn't really benefit from it. From the beginning, they only used the rules to force the infernals to gather towards Chen Guang. They didn't take the initiative to attack the infernals. Later, when they saw that the situation wasn't looking good, they tried to steal the kill. However, they were targeted by Chen Guang a few times. They didn't even get 2 bites of the meat, but instead, they lost another general. They tried to lure 2 monsters out, but the infernal fire in the center of the Colosseum was too concentrated. Either these stone people lost all their resistance and lay limply on the ground, or they got up to fight back, and several of them would attack at the same time. In the end, when they realized that they couldn't do anything, they turned their attention to the scattered hellfires outside. However, it was already too late. The rest of the hellfires had long since died at the hands of the ordinary players, and the remaining dozen or so were surrounded and attacked by the ordinary players in 2s and 3s. When they realized that Mr. Noon wasn't in a bad situation and had another way to suppress the infernals, the ordinary players weren't anxious anymore. They cooperated with each other to kill the monsters, and their efficiency increased to another level. The Protoss had 2 choices in front of them. They could either steal the infernals that the ordinary players were halfway through killing, or they could only watch as the last of the infernals were killed. In the end, after considering all aspects, Yu Ting decided to let the Protoss stop. The Protoss said that they didn't want to touch the infernals that were halfway through killing the ordinary players. They were the noble Protoss, and they couldn't do such a shameful thing. However, in reality, Yu Ting had other considerations. It was obvious that in this Quest 7, Noon's strength would be greatly increased. Even if it didn't change, they wouldn't be able to provoke Noon's anger. If he changed his mind and decided to settle the score with the Protoss, the losses that the Protoss would face would be immeasurable. It was obvious that as the advance party, the idea of killing the big boss, Noon, in their first mission was just an impossible dream. Therefore, the problem in front of Yu Ting was once again back to square one. He had to do his best to help the advance team retain more effective forces and complete the mission of the Protoss advance team. In this mysterious mission world, in this so-called game that was not just a game, they had to build a bridgehead that belonged to the Protoss race. Now they had to restrain their behavior. In short, they had to admit defeat. As a result, in Mission 7, which clearly had the upper hand in terms of rules, the Protoss had practically come up empty-handed. Although the normal players were struggling to survive, they were more proactive and managed to steal quite a few Hellfire kills. However, Yu Ting's concession was indeed forgiven by Chen Guang. Otherwise, Chen Guang wouldn't have just left a few harsh words. Peasant stomped heavily on the neck of the Dark Hades golem, who had been tortured to the point where he didn't emit any heat. The huge stone golem exploded. Congratulations to the gamers for completing Mission 7. The reward points will be automatically distributed according to the gamer's mission contribution. With the sound of the notification, the sound of winning a prize from the slot machine was heard in the reward point shop of the gamers. The gamers counted their reward points in the reward point shop and were shocked. The reward points of the Hades golem were more generous than they had imagined. It was as high as 10,000 points per kill. The shield warrior of Azeroth and the elven magical archer who killed more than 7 Hades golems were overjoyed. Though the other gamers had fewer kills, each of them had more than 4 Hades golems. However, when they accidentally looked at the man who had changed into a suit of yellow armor, they felt as though the men were speechless and the women were crying. Everyone had worked hard to obtain these few kills. They didn't know what Mr. Adam had done. He had nearly 1,000 Hades golems' heads in his hands. He was going to be rich. The gamers looked at Chen Guang as though he was a pauper looking at a rich man. They were envious, jealous, and hateful. Chen Guang gave them goosebumps. However, he didn't want to tell them that he wasn't as rich as they thought. He was actually quite pitiful. Although the total amount of reward points that I earned instantly shot up to 10 million, probably because the reward points store recognized my purchasing power, it immediately gave me a dazzling list of items to buy in the store system, but I could only look at it, I couldn't afford it. What an awakened ability! Nearly 10 million points were gone just like that. How much was he sucking? Fortunately, the Hellfire provided a lot of nutrients for my Earth Paste Exploder ability, so I didn't need to use my reward points to buy anything, nor did I need to awaken my ability to become stronger. Otherwise, my advantage would be gone. Forget it. I couldn't let anyone find out my weakness. I had to maintain the demeanor of an expert. Looking at the gamers using their points to change their equipment, Chen Guang forced himself to be calm. However, he was really envious. The old geezer's team took out the Apocalypse tank. It seemed like they had installed a light prism cannon on the tank and some sort of multi-dimensional combat system. The genius high school student and the electrical appliance fatty were even more overboard. God knows how they came up with an individual combat mecha. I didn't know how strong their armor was, but it looked quite scary. Rice cooker armor, water dispenser leg armor, washing machine chest plate. In short, this was a strange and magical single-soldier combat mech that made people speechless. However, with the super strong mosquito swatter and electric mosquito killer that the household appliance fatty had previously made, no one would look down on their strange armor. God knows if their rice cooker armor had the function of an AI battle command center, if the water dispenser armor had the anti-gravity jet acceleration function, or if the washing machine chest plate had the ability to absorb energy. The warrior, sorcerer, and beast tamer's equipment was not inferior. In addition to the fireball magician, the other two were still far from the threshold of 200,000 reward points. In order to exchange for real-time combat power in the next mission 8 and 9, they simply spent all their reward points. Only the magician was not too far away from the third awakening. There was a great possibility that he would reach 200,000 reward points after the end of mission 8. So he simply kept it as their ultimate move. Obviously, the warrior's equipment was not strictly determined according to the division in World of Warcraft. At this time, he had already changed into a shining armor. His left hand was still holding Azanatha's rampart, but his right hand was holding a longsword that Qin Guang was very familiar with. It was the legendary Wrath of the Windseeker. As for the beast tamer, Misha was no longer beside him. Instead, it was replaced by a magic storm raptor that was the same size as him. Then, a longbow appeared in his hand. It was the legendary Wrath of the Stars of Solidar. As for the original Sonda coach team without a leader, it did not seem that there was much change. They seemed to lack someone to make decisions. They did not know if it was better to use their reward points to exchange for real-time combat power, or to save them for the Third Awakening. Because of the Sonda coach, they could not ask Qin Guang for advice. Since they were on the opposite side of Dang Noon from the beginning and when he killed the Sonda coach, the card magician and the others could not so quickly put down their pride and take the initiative to ask for peace with Dang Noon. In addition, Dang Noon's attitude so far was not so friendly, and they did not have the confidence to continue to get help from him. No one knew what Task 8 would be like. They did not have the confidence to pass it, but they were reluctant to give up the Third Awakening that seemed not too far away. However, the death of the Sonda coach made the alliance between their teams very fragile. No one was willing to stand up and take the initiative to sacrifice their reward points at this time because it meant that if they got more than 100,000 reward points in the next Task 8, the Third Awakening that was originally at their fingertips would become out of reach because of a fine line. In the absence of a person with enough prestige to take the lead, no one would be willing to sacrifice for others and place their hope of survival on others being willing to do their best to protect themselves after the Third Awakening. There were basically no real weak people who could appear in this slaughtering world. Even if there were, more than half of the people had been eliminated from Task 1 to the current Task 7, and the weak people had now been reset. As the saying goes, one is marked by the company one keeps, and one is blackened by the company one keeps. The card magician and the others chose to follow the Sonda coach may not be so pure. Perhaps they were also taking advantage of the Sonda coach's enthusiasm to lead the team. On the surface, the Sonda coach was the leader, but in fact, each had their own ulterior motives and secretly preserved their strength. Now that their leader was gone, they were unwilling to join someone else's stable team and continue to live under someone else's roof. At this time, whether it was cooperation or mutual trust, they had reached a very stable state. It would be difficult for others to integrate, and they might even be used as cannon fodder. No one was a fool, and no one was willing to be cannon fodder. So even if the remaining people in the Sonda coach's team were suspicious of each other, they still chose to maintain their small team in such an awkward way. At this time, Qin Guang was afraid that others would ask him how he planned to spend the reward points, so he deliberately pretended to be unapproachable. After the end of Task 7, he sat cross-legged in the corner without saying a word and pretended to be deep in thought. Of course, his mind was not idle. Until now, he was still constantly trying to figure out the true meaning of this killing task. As the progress of the task progressed little by little, Qin Guang also gradually understood the true meaning of the killing task from the beginning to a touch of darkness. It was obvious that this wasn't an independent existence of the world in a cup. This was probably the beginning of a change. Though he wasn't sure what was happening, it was likely that his world in a cup would change from a single-player game to a legendary large-scale online RPG game. Qin Guang speculated that it was likely to be related to the merging of the real world and the real world. Perhaps during the merging process, an unexpected tunnel was opened between the heavenly world and the 3,000 worlds in the heavenly Holy Grail. That was why Yu Ting and the other celestials were projected into his world in a cup. At the same time, a tunnel also appeared between the real world and the world in a cup, causing Peasant and the other mortals to be dragged into the world in a cup. It was precisely because of the emergence of these Protoss and human players that the world in a cup changed its original characteristics. From a rather random quest that only targeted itself, it began to evolve into a complete large-scale game system that was richer in layers and frameworks. In this game system, the merchant shop system was very important. The reward points were the various benefits that the gamers obtained from killing monsters or completing missions. They represented the core elements of the evolution of the gamer's abilities. In addition, the existence of the quest system was to give players the simplest hint so that they wouldn't be confused and wouldn't know what situation they were facing. The illustrated handbook was to provide further hints to the gamers during the mission process. It was also to help the new gamers understand the game. The ability enhancement in the merchant shop system, which was the awakened ability, was similar to the skill tree in normal online games. Perhaps because this was the first time the world in a cup developed a large-scale online game function, the awakened ability was set up in a myriad of strange ways. It was very discordant and unsystematic. It wasn't like the traditional online games, where the professions such as warrior, mage, priest, sacred knight, bandit, and warlock had a clear division of labor. Perhaps it was based on the characteristics of the gamers in the real world, and the awakened ability was specifically developed and enhanced. The randomly set ability enhancement made it difficult to quantify the skill tree of the gamers. For example, Peasant's Hourglass of Time was like a BUG, but it wasn't very effective in actual combat. The electrical appliance Fat Man's strange ability to summon electrical appliances was very practical, and he had the upper hand in the early stages. The gamers who could tank the sniper rifle were even more ridiculous. It was unreasonable to summon the Apocalypse tank, but it was useless against the Hellfire tank. Such a game developer would definitely be ridiculed to death by players in real life if it was a game developer like this. As for the skill tree of the Celestial gamers, Chen Guang wasn't able to find any clues. Perhaps it had something to do with the abilities of the Celestials in the Boundless Realm. For example, Yu Ting must be thinking of a way to develop his power of thunder. Due to the high starting point of the Protoss race, it was much more difficult for them to awaken their abilities than ordinary players. However, once they accumulated enough reward points and pressed the button to strengthen their abilities, the effect would be terrifying. Besides, the distribution of rewards for killing monsters wasn't much different from normal online games. The rewards would be calculated based on the last slash, and 70% of the players would receive the last slash. Otherwise, the rewards would be distributed based on the contribution points of a single mission. It wasn't difficult to understand. Why was his awakened ability so ridiculous? Why did the celestial power of the Celestials burst out of his anus after the empowerment? What role did he have to play in this game mission? Also, why did the Celestials say that this game was related to the survival of the entire heavenly world? Why were they so hostile toward him from the start? What was his main plot mission? Was his true faction the Celestials or the human faction? If he led the human faction to obtain more contribution points, would it mean the victory of the human faction? What benefits would there be? If the Celestials obtained more contribution points, what benefits would it bring to the Celestials? What harm would it bring to himself? Until now, Chen Guang was clueless about these questions. He was only sure that he couldn't lose. He had to think of a way to survive. Chapter 1187. Just as he was lost in his thoughts, a sudden change occurred in the colossal Colosseum. An inexplicable white fog appeared out of thin air beneath everyone's feet. Before anyone could even scream, their entire bodies were shrouded in the thick fog. Chen Guang was puzzled. It seemed like Mission 8 was coming. Why wasn't there any notification? Wasn't the fog a little too strong? Even I can't see a thing. He tried to concentrate his inner strength in his eyes. When he stared, he couldn't see more than a meter. Not only that, but when he spread out his mental power, it was also blocked by the fog. Normally, his mental power could cover a maximum of several hundred meters. Wherever his mind went, it was as if he could see it with his naked eye, or even more vividly than the naked eye. But at this time, in this thick fog, he could not even reach a distance of 5 meters. Furthermore, he could not see as clearly as before. It was as if he was in the clouds and fog, as if he was looking at a small piece of film with a super thick mosaic. Lord Yuding, I can't see anything. Lower your voice, I know. Chen Guang pricked up his ears and heard the conversation from the distant celestial race. He understood that he couldn't see, and the celestial race wasn't any better. He heaved a sigh of relief, but he became nervous again. If the celestial race was finished, it wouldn't be a good thing for him. Mr. Dang? Are you there? Peasant's voice came from beside him. She must have found her way here based on her memory. Chen Guang nodded. He remembered that she couldn't see his movements, so he replied, Yes, what's the matter? I'd like to ask you a question. Peasant sounded hesitant. Chen Guang said, Just ask. Don't beat around the bush. I won't hide what I can tell you. It's useless to ask me what I don't know. There are only 2 small missions left before the massacre mission ends. I'd like to know if gamers like us can return to the outside world after the missions end. Will we come back in the future? Like you, a veteran gamer? In addition, can the abilities we obtain in the game still be used in the real world? Also, even if he couldn't use it in real life, these abilities should still exist when he returned to the game, right? Just like you, Mr. Adam? Peasant took 2 steps towards Chen Guang. When they could see each other's faces clearly, she asked a bunch of questions. Chen Guang asked her about it. These questions were very important, but he was unable to answer them. He was just pretending to be an old player. What the hell did he know? However, he couldn't ignore Peasant's question. Since he had bragged, he had to answer for it. He was shameless. Based on my experience, you can leave this place unscathed after completing the mission. In the outside world, you can retain your memories, but as for your abilities, it's very complicated. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Right now, I can't give you an accurate answer because everyone's situation is different. If you come back next time, you should be able to inherit the ability. It seemed like Chen Guang's answers were clear and logical, but he didn't say anything. If Sherlock was wrong and didn't remember what happened, then Peasant wouldn't remember Sherlock's nonsense. If Peasant retained his memories, then he would be right. As for the ability, Sherlock didn't give an accurate answer. Even if it was about inheriting abilities, Sherlock didn't give an accurate answer. Instead, he hid a trap in his words. It was possible that he didn't have the ability. There's nothing I can do about it. This old man always does things in a watertight manner. Is that so? I understand. Thank you, Mr. Adam. Chen Guang laughed and said, Don't mention it. Peasant, what's your job in the real world? Peasant turned his head slightly. He didn't know why Sherlock was asking such a question. However, Chen Guang changed his words. He realized that if he asked someone else, what if that person answered and asked him the same question instead? With his identity, he would be recognized immediately. However, he didn't want to lie. Forget it, don't say it. It's not important. Oh. Peasant turned his head and became alert. If Sherlock hadn't changed his tone, he would have blurted it out. He didn't know why he had an unnecessary trust in Sherlock. When he stood beside Sherlock, he would let his guard down. He always felt that this Mr. looked very similar to a certain person outside. Unfortunately, everyone had changed their appearances when they came in, and no one knew what the other's real appearance looked like. They were also on guard against each other, so it was not good for them to take the initiative to ask. It was rare for Sherlock to ask. If she told the truth, with Sherlock's personality, he would tell the truth too. She had missed the opportunity. Peasant was worried. She blinked and remembered the camera in her eyelashes. She stuck out her tongue. It was better if they didn't know each other's identities. Would she be harming him? What should I do if I end up becoming enemies with him because of this? Wouldn't she be creating trouble for Sherlock? Sherlock looked powerful. Though Sherlock was also powerful, Sherlock didn't seem to be much weaker. While Peasant was lost in his thoughts, the fog in the sky became thicker. In the blink of an eye, everyone couldn't see anything. Even though they were close by, all they could see was a vast expanse of whiteness. At the same time, the electronic notification sounded in everyone's mind. Mission 8. Collect the target objects in the Chaos Labyrinth. Collect 10 target objects to complete the mission. As soon as the voice finished speaking, everyone felt as if the world was spinning around them. Chen Guang was shocked. Did this mean that there was a world within a world in the massacre world? Was he trying to transfer everyone to another labyrinth? After spinning like this for about 3 to 4 minutes, everyone's bodies gradually stabilized. The fog quickly dissipated, and what appeared in front of them was a milky white wall. The wall rose from the ground and reached the sky. Looking up from below, it was at least tens of meters high. Everyone was teleported. Chen Guang was standing in the middle of a long and narrow tunnel. Peasant, who was supposed to be by his side, was nowhere to be found. The passageway was about 8 meters wide. Looking ahead, it took a turn after about 50 meters. Chen Guang stomped his feet, and the stomping sounds traveled far in the spacious tunnel before reverberating back. It felt as though there was no sound at all. He walked to the bottom of the wall and touched it. The wall felt cold, but it was very smooth. It felt like plaster. Chen Guang clenched his fists and channeled his inner strength before punching the wall heavily. After a loud bang, the wall was still as smooth as a mirror, and it didn't suffer any damage. A new illustration card even popped up in Chen Guang's mind. Chaos Labyrinth Wall. Characteristics: indestructible. Fine, you win. You set it to be indestructible. You're good. But do you think that's a problem for me? The walls weren't of much use to Chen Guang, who could fly. He immediately stepped on the walls and climbed up. Only a fool would walk the labyrinth. Labyrinths were the most annoying. Boom. Chen Guang slammed into the invisible wall at the top of the high wall and fell to the ground. It was another new illustration card. Chaos Labyrinth Invisible Smallpox. Characteristics: indestructible. This was clearly targeting him. Chen Guang was furious, but there was nothing he could do. Forget it. Although he hated maze-like games since he was young, he had no choice but to accept his fate since the game had been forcefully set in this way. Calming himself down, Chen Guang raised his leg and walked forward. But before he could take 2 steps, he suddenly heard a cracking sound beneath his feet, as if he had triggered a mechanism. The wall beside him rumbled, and a crack appeared on the wall. Chen Guang was alarmed. He turned and got into a fighting stance. The crack extended to the other side of the labyrinth wall, where a bewildered peasant stood. "Mr. Dang, why are you here?" Peasant was overjoyed, and he ran through the crack towards Chen Guang. As he ran, he said, "My labyrinth is too much. The front, back, left, and right are all blocked. If the walls didn't crack, I wouldn't know what to do." Chen Guang looked down at his feet. "It couldn't be such a coincidence. I stepped on a mechanism when I lifted my leg, and the mechanism released you? We changed positions, but you're still so close to me? I find it unbelievable." Chen Guang didn't reply to Peasant. Instead, he looked warily at her. At that moment, he heard the sound of splashing water behind him. Peasant shouted as he ran, "Be careful, Mr. Dang." When Chen Guang turned around, he saw a humanoid blob of liquid behind him that was changing its shape. About 3 seconds later, an exact replica of himself appeared in front of him. It wasn't his appearance in the outside world. It was his current bald and strong appearance. What kind of trick is this? Chen Guang lifted his hand to look at the illustration card. Monster card. Clone, the ultimate skill of a mutated elf. After reading the skill, Chen Guang didn't have time to think. He instinctively jumped to the side. However, an orange-yellow stream of light shot out from the clone's back. It even followed Chen Guang's movements and turned to hit him. Gosh, he knew it would be like this. The directional skill couldn't be dodged. Chen Guang was hit by the orange-yellow ray of light, and his movements became sluggish. He felt his body become lighter, which was probably due to the intangible state. It was the special effect of the Phantom Blade, the must-have equipment for the mutated elf. There had to be a follow-up. While he was thinking, a ball of water shot out from behind the orange-yellow ray. The ball of water hit Chen Guang's head, causing him to see stars and be unable to move. It was a familiar feeling. It was the legendary Phantom Blade's attack. Was he going to lose his HP? No, he wasn't injured. He couldn't move. Chen Guang realized that the mutated elf didn't use the agility form to deal damage. Instead, it used the strength form to stun and control him. Peasant was in danger. He couldn't move his head, but his eyes turned slightly. He saw his bald clone brush past him and pounce on his back. Peasant's exclamation came from behind him. What's going on? Chapter 1188. Peasant was astonished by the two identical midday situations. Furthermore, the clone's movements weren't any different from the real Chen Guang. When he charged over, she couldn't evade it at all. Seeing Chen Guang standing stiffly in his spot, Peasant gritted his teeth and thought quickly. He took out the time hourglass and cast time deceleration on the clone. Though the clone had the same physical strength as Chen Guang, she wasn't as resistant to time as Chen Guang. But just as the clone was controlled, the sound of a waterfall came from a place a little further away. Chen Guang saw the true form of the transformed elf. It was a 2-meter tall, crystal-clear body made of flowing water. It had no eyebrows, eyes, and nose. Only its head and arms could be seen. It also had a single leg that resembled a whirlpool. When Chen Guang saw it, it reared back and swung its head, transforming into a whirlpool as it charged forward. Although it took a long time, it only took 2 seconds. After decelerating the clone's movements, Peasant dodged the clone's heavy punch. She could only watch as the transformed elf transformed into a wave that charged at Chen Guang and engulfed Chen Guang. That wasn't the end, as the wave continued to charge at her. As the wave came closer, Peasant couldn't avoid it. At this critical moment, an earth wall inexplicably appeared in front of her, fiercely blocking the attack of the transformed elf. Chen Guang wiped the perspiration off his head and muttered to himself, "Fortunately, mud counters water. Otherwise, I'd be in danger." He was covered in cold sweat. He was caught off guard by the transformed elf's attack. He didn't have time to suspect whether the peasant behind him was real or fake. When he was controlled, he thought she was dead. The maximum control time of the power transformation attack was 4 seconds. 4 seconds was enough for Peasant to die 7 or 8 times. Fortunately, she was the real Peasant. She used time to delay the clone. The time that Chen Guang was controlled was not as long as 4 seconds due to the restraining effect of the earth element on the water element. He regained his freedom in about 2.5 seconds. The moment he regained his freedom, it was also the moment when the transformed elf's wave attack came right at him. There was no way to dodge, so he took it head-on. The violent impact of the water scraped his skin, almost scraping his flesh off. But at this time, the superiority of the earth elemental over the water elemental showed itself again. Though he was disfigured, he recovered quickly and didn't suffer any serious injuries. When he regained his senses, he was able to summon a mud wall to protect Peasant. As soon as Chen Guang finished speaking, the clone was freed. Peasant's time manipulation had expired. The clone's target was Peasant. Though Peasant managed to escape, he had to face the danger of being surrounded by wolves and tigers. Her time hourglass was on cooldown, so she could only count on Chen Guang. Chen Guang didn't disappoint her. He turned around and fought with the clone. As for the real body of the transformed elf, it was like the game. It looked powerful, but it was only capable of long-range attacks. His body, which was made of water, punched in the air. Every time he punched, a small ball of water shot towards Peasant like a shot put. However, the ball of water was blocked by the soil that appeared in the path of the ball of water. Chen Guang fought with the clone while he had to create soil to protect Peasant. Fortunately, he had rich experience in dealing with himself during the mirror image mission. He seemed to be having a hard time, but he was still able to control the situation. The clone had copied the characteristics of the transformed elf in the game. Its health points were the same as Chen Guang's, but its attack power was only half of Chen Guang's. The health points didn't refer to the health points above the clone's head. It referred to the resistance of the clone. For example, when a gamer was fighting with another gamer and was hit on the temple, he would receive a critical hit, and his health bar would be emptied. If the gamer was hit in the stomach, he would be able to withstand 5 to 8 punches before collapsing. At this moment, Chen Guang was facing the clone in such a manner. However, only Chen Guang knew how resilient he was. Fortunately, the clone didn't have the regenerative ability of the Earth Paste Exploder. The power of its punches was reduced by half, so it couldn't cause any substantial damage to Chen Guang. As long as the clone prevented the clone from damaging Peasant, it wouldn't be a problem. After about 20 seconds, the transformed elf skills were on cooldown. Then, it attacked Chen Guang with a series of ethereal and transformed elf attacks. This time, Chen Guang was prepared. He prepared a perimeter wall for Peasant and instructed him to prepare the time hourglass. After Qin Guang was immobilized, the clone threw Qin Guang at Peasant and was hit by the time-slowing effect of the time hourglass. The transformed elf used the same method to create waves. However, he crashed into the wall. A magical beast was a magical beast. It didn't have the intelligence of a human. Once the magical beast's weakness and movement pattern were grasped, it was as easy as walking a dog. 2 minutes later, Chen Guang finally shattered his mirror image with a punch. But before he could feel proud of himself, another silhouette formed from water appeared beside him. The unlucky transformed elf summoned another mirror image clone. "Mister, I can't go on like this. My reward points are running out." Chen Guang could afford it, but every time he was immobilized, Peasant had to expend his reward points to activate the time hourglass. She already owed a huge amount of debt, and she still didn't know how to repay it. She had saved up a little with great difficulty, but now she had almost used up all of it. She thought she could see the light after a while. She didn't expect another mirror image clone to appear. She couldn't take it anymore. "Let me think of another way." Chen Guang wiped the perspiration off his forehead. He didn't expect the first creature in the labyrinth of chaos to be so difficult to deal with. He continued to stall the clone as he racked his brains. Previously, he had tried to use the innate ability of the marmalade exploder to see if he could directly absorb the water elemental energy in the clone, but he failed. The clone was a mirror image ability, so the elemental energy was unstable. He had to rely on the transformed elf's ability to twist the elemental energy together. When he tried to absorb it, the elemental energy would collapse and retreat. The elemental energy moved from one side of the clone to the other, but he couldn't absorb it. He could only pin his hopes on the reward point shop. Forget it, he didn't have any reward points. He couldn't even afford a box of matches. Qin Guang looked at Peasant. How could he forget about her? "Peasant, search in your merchant shop for items that can reduce mana. These are elemental creatures. Like the Hades, the mana reduction effect has a mystical bonus." 10 seconds later, Peasant was overjoyed. "There's a Zwaman Berserker glove that costs 2,000 reward points. The description says Magic Breaker. Buy it and let me try it on." 5 seconds later, Chen Guang took the wooden and metal glove that Peasant threw at him. It looked like 2 human heads. He wore it and read the description. He was amused. "An exquisite piece of equipment from the Grand Devil Temple, Zwaman. Only berserkers who hate mana can wear it. It was imbued with Magic Breaker ability by the Grand Devil Shaman. It is the natural enemy of all magicians." Was this item exquisite? I could get a 3-year-old kid to do it by hand and make it look better than this. Forget it, let's test the effects first. Chen Guang retracted his disdain and threw a punch at the clone before him. Unlike before, the moment his fist came into contact with the clone, a dazzling light blue light burst out from the point of contact between the two. Chen Guang retracted his fist and saw a fist-sized mark on the chest of the replica. Though the mark was dissipating rapidly, the breath of the replica was much weaker. It was effective, but it wasn't enough. Dealing with the replica wasn't enough to injure the body of the elf. Since the elf had the phantom blade, who knew if it had any mana regeneration equipment? Are there any long-range mana reduction items? Peasant searched again. There are, but the effects are poor. What's that? Trainee Darts Athlete Wilkins Magical Practice Darts. What a long name. What special effects does it have? Only one. It can be automatically retrieved after being shot. Isn't that good? As it's a practice darts, there's no needle. The dart head is a magnet. Don't worry, give it to me. It doesn't matter if there's a needle or not. Chen Guang said loudly. His hands were itching. He hadn't used his darts for a long time. His skills hadn't deteriorated, right? 3 seconds later, Chen Guang flicked his left hand and threw the dart. The headless dart drew an arc in the air and headed for the head of the elf, who was a few meters away. It coincidentally interrupted the elf's wave-like form. The elf raised its hand and was about to charge forward in the wave-like form. After the dart hit its head tilted backward. It didn't move, and it froze momentarily. The elf wasn't able to charge forward, so Chen Guang swung his boxing glove to restrain the mirror image. Peasant didn't need to awaken his ability to overcome the difficulty. After a few seconds, the shape-shifting elf executed his combo attack and successfully immobilized Chen Guang. The clone abandoned Chen Guang and chased after Peasant. This couldn't go on. When the morphing sprite skill came off cooldown, Chen Guang suddenly had the idea of shooting the dart at the lump of morphing sprite, and it actually worked. He was only affected by the speed reduction and ethereal effects of the phantom blade, but he wasn't stunned. As long as he wasn't stunned, the clone wouldn't be able to shake him off, and Peasant wouldn't have to expend his points. After a full 10 minutes, finally, accompanied by a clattering sound, the clone and the original spirit body collapsed together. The first magical beast that charged out of the labyrinth of chaos was dead. Both of them looked at each other and heaved a sigh of relief. They didn't expect the mission system to announce the rewards. The reward for a magical beast was as high as 50,000 points. Chen Guang had the majority, but Peasant had at least 40%. The reason was that Chen Guang used two types of firepower provided by Peasant. When distributing the reward points, it was calculated as her contribution points. If it were anyone else, they would be unhappy. However, Chen Guang didn't have such thoughts. He didn't know where his reward points would go. If Peasant held onto the reward points, she would be able to purchase items from the merchant shop. With their cooperation, Sherlock didn't have to worry about Peasant rejecting his request. Her reward points were earned by Sherlock, so it wasn't a problem for Peasant to purchase items for him. Good, let's go. Who knows what the 10 targets are? Chen Guang waved his hand and gestured for Peasant to follow him. Chen Guang wasn't bothered by it. Although it was strange for her to come to his side right from the start, he wasn't bothered by it. She wasn't a threat to his safety. Wait, Mr. Dang, I discovered something. Peasant started rummaging on the ground. Chen Guang urged him, "Stop rummaging, the ground is bare. Can't you see it clearly?" "No, Mr. Dang, what do you think this is? Could it be the target that the mission requires us to collect?" Peasant rubbed his fingers as he stood in front of Chen Guang. Chen Guang squinted his eyes and stared intently at the space between Peasant's fingers. After a long while, he asked, Are you fooling me?" He felt that he wasn't blind. Peasant didn't have anything in his hands. Peasant looked at him blankly, as though she didn't understand what he meant. After a while, she came to her senses nervously. "Mr. Dang, you can't see what I'm holding?" Chen Guang was angry. "What are you talking about?" Peasant raised his right hand as though he was holding something and extended it towards Chen Guang. "A transparent miniature dart. It's a dart, but it's different from the practice dart that I bought." Chen Guang narrowed his eyes. He waved his hand in front of Peasant's fingers, but he couldn't see or touch anything. He didn't believe it and inserted his finger between Peasant's fingers, but it passed through without touching anything. Peasant bent down to pick up the dart in a panic. It was as though he had dropped something. Chen Guang felt his hair stand on end. Did he see a ghost? He was bewildered. What's going on? He didn't understand why there was something that he couldn't see or touch, but others could. "I received a notification. This is one of the items we need to collect. It's a strange name, Dart Idol." "Wait, Dart Idol? What do you think it looks like?" Chen Guang asked hurriedly. Peasant observed it for a while and said, "It's a dart that we often see on television. It's made of crystal, and it's translucent like a work of art." "I see." Chen Guang understood. This dart was a one-on-one drop, and no one could snatch it. "I killed the monster, so why did Peasant drop it? That wasn't fair." "Is this a directional drop? Why did it drop mine?" Peasant understood as well. "That should be the case. Forget it, let's go. It's probably random." Chen Guang looked carefree as he waved his hand nonchalantly and walked forward. The labyrinth of chaos was within the boundaries of the Roman Colosseum. They walked forward and turned a corner. They could vaguely hear the cheers of the spectators. After a while, Peasant triggered the mechanism. A 3-meter-tall Tin Woodman appeared in front of them. To be precise, it wasn't a Tin Woodman. It was an empty armor shell. Though there was no one inside, the armor was strong. It had great strength and defense, and it was fast. Chen Guang had a tough battle with the Tin Woodman. The only benefit was that he only obtained the Tin Woodman, so he didn't have to protect Peasant. I'm really seeing a ghost. Why did you drop your item while you were a bystander? Chen Guang was infuriated when he heard Peasant say that she had stumbled upon an alto mini-sculpture. He finally understood that the so-called 10 main targets were actually miniature versions of his 10 statues. However, he couldn't understand it no matter what. He was the one who killed the monsters, and the statue was his to begin with, so why didn't it drop for him? Stand further away next time. Okay. The third time, when Chen Guang spent a lot of effort to shatter a floating knife, Peasant ran over from 50 meters away and picked up a pencil crystal sculpture that she was talking about. Chen Guang broke down. Forget it, he didn't know how strong the magical beasts in the Chaos Labyrinth were. Since he encountered Peasant, he couldn't possibly chase her away. Perhaps the setting of this unlucky Chaos Labyrinth was that if two people formed a team, whoever obtained the first object would have to collect all the objects first before the other team could start collecting. That must be the case. Don't panic, I still have hope. Chen Guang consoled himself. On the other side, the gamers who were scattered throughout the Chaos Labyrinth were in different situations. Some people accidentally stepped on an ant on the ground while walking, and with a "bayu" sound, a miniature sculpture would jump out and land under their feet, causing the soles of their feet to hurt. A gamer fought a magical beast for 800 rounds before defeating it with a single blow. There were also gamers who encountered powerful magical beasts. They couldn't defeat the magical beasts, so they had to escape. They were chased to the ends of the earth. In the process of fighting and escaping, some gamers unleashed their potential and came up with various tricks to kill the magical beasts. There were also gamers who were careless and perished on the spot. Besides the magical beasts, there were various hidden weapons in the Chaos Labyrinth that could deal a fatal blow to the gamers. Compared to the mortals and Protoss who had died in battle, Chen Guang, who had killed 3 monsters in a row without any results, didn't seem that unlucky. Peasant, who had been following Chen Guang with a heavy heart, was hesitating. She guessed why she was by Tang Wu's side. The mastermind who gave her the side mission must be behind it. His motive was for her to secretly take pictures of him. She wasn't against it. She hadn't returned the reward points she owed, but she knew that even if she returned them, the matter wouldn't be resolved. She felt that she was too much. She didn't just lie down and receive the reward points, but she also obtained all the items. If she was Tang Wu, she would have gone berserk. Tang Wu? I'm not angry at all. I'm calm, very calm. Chapter 1189. After dealing with 8 heavy armor, Tyrannosaurus Rex, Inferno Hound, Vicious Vines, and other strange magical beasts, all 8 of which were peasant statues, Chen Guang finally broke down. He thought that since he was the savior and had 10 statues, he didn't have to collect them. Suddenly, the same notification sounded in the minds of all the gamers. Congratulations to you, Ting, for collecting 10 target items. You will receive generous rewards and be sent out of the labyrinth of chaos. This was only the first sentence, so it wasn't a huge blow. Yu Ting wasn't weak. If he was lucky, it wouldn't be surprising if he collected 10 targets before Chen Guang. But then, the electronic voice added a few more sentences, which was a little sad. Currently, reporting the deaths of the gamers. Gao Liang, Hu Huan Akasa's tribe god, Lake Bernard demon, and other gamers have been killed in battle and have been reset. The gamers were dumbfounded. They hadn't heard any death notifications in the labyrinth of chaos. They thought it was a happy ending, but they didn't expect the labyrinth to delay the notifications and report them in a centralized manner. Immediately, the survivors felt extremely sad, but they also felt their hairs stand on end. There were mortals and celestials among the dead gamers. This meant that in the labyrinth of chaos, everyone had the possibility of dying. But this wasn't the biggest blow to Chen Guang. Then, the electronic notification started to count the mission completion of the other gamers. After Yu Ting, who had collected 10 targets, was Peasant, who had collected 8 targets. Then, it was Withany and the others who had collected 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Finally, the damned labyrinth singled out Chen Guang. Special note, up until now, only the veteran player Noon has yet to collect a single target. If he isn't able to collect the target before the deadline, he will be killed and reset. Chen Guang stared with his eyes wide open. He thought he had heard wrongly. What a joke. The old man was the owner of the heavenly Holy Grail. What right did he have to reset him? In the words of an official, who gave you the right? However, his arrogance did not last long, as he immediately broke out in a cold sweat. According to the nature of the heavenly Holy Grail, perhaps this was the original setting of the realm within the cup. So, there was really a possibility that he would die? Mr. Dang, why don't I go? Let's split up. Peasant said nervously. She felt that she was a hindrance to Mr. Dunn. If he was alone, he wouldn't need to protect himself, and the efficiency of dealing with the phantom beasts would be much higher. He would also be able to obtain the target. She was too much of a hindrance. When she suggested splitting up, an alarm went off in Peasant's mind, reminding her that she had to complete her side mission. But even so, she really did not have the face to stay with Dang Niu any longer. Chen Guang rejected her request. There were two reasons. Compared to other awakened abilities, though Peasant's time control was incredible, it was too weak for direct combat. First, she had to consume reward points to use the hourglass. Though she had obtained tens of thousands of reward points, it was not enough for her expenses. Even if she could use her ability to slow down the phantom beast's time, if she couldn't break the defense of the phantom beasts, what was the use? The strength of the phantom beasts that she encountered was not something she could defend against. Chen Guang wasn't sure why the others were able to obtain the crystal sculpture of his statue so easily, and he wasn't willing to think about it. He knew that he might have been tricked. He was dealing with powerful phantom beasts, while the others were dealing with weak ones. With the characteristics that the slaughter world had displayed so far, this was completely possible. Chen Guang couldn't let Peasant leave just like that. The mythical beasts that he had encountered were difficult to deal with. Chen Guang didn't want to gamble on whether Peasant would encounter an easier mythical beast after leaving him. More than 5 gamers had perished in the labyrinth of chaos. It's not necessary. Continue to follow me. I don't believe that you won't be able to kill me after you collect the required items. Chen Guang gritted his teeth and said. His stubbornness was at its peak. He decided to fight the labyrinth of chaos. Okay, sorry to trouble you. Peasant was in a dilemma. When she was traveling with Chen Guang, the phantom beasts that they encountered were too difficult to deal with. If she was alone, she would have died at the hands of the first mutated elf. When she had the thought of leaving Dang Niu, the alarm in her head was deafening. It made her hallucinate. Though she didn't receive a clear hint, she felt that even if she collected all 10 required items, she would be killed if she refused to carry out the side mission. It seemed like a simple suggestion, but deep in her heart, she was determined to die. Chen Guang rejected her request, allowing her heart to calm down. However, at the same time, she felt ashamed. Although Chen Guang was a smart person, he could tell that Su Tao was conflicted in her heart. However, he never expected that there would be a deeper meaning hidden in her eyes. Thus, he consoled, you don't have to be too bothered about it. Although those illusory beasts are powerful, they're still not my opponent. It's just a matter of time. It's a good thing that you can complete the mission and leave this labyrinth as soon as possible. Okay, it's like this. Thank you, Dang Niu, Peasant replied with a heavy heart. She wasn't sure. She felt that even if she collected all the required items, she wouldn't be able to leave. The two of them walked for a while. In this chaos labyrinth, no matter how far they walked, they could only see endless turns and turns. Not only that, but what he saw would always be the same tall white wall. The color would never change, making it seem lonely and boring. Unless he could encounter a magical beast, but that would be a different feeling. It would be better to be boring. They didn't know what was going on, but they didn't find anything after walking for a long time. Instead, there was a new electronic notification that more and more gamers had completed their mission. If not, Peasant had a new excuse to split up. Chen Guang gestured for her to keep quiet. Chen Guang looked ahead warily. What's wrong? Peasant noticed Chen Guang's solemn expression and became nervous. Chen Guang narrowed his eyes and said, "It's a long story. Stand here and don't move. Be careful." As he spoke, he tried to walk forward. His steps were light and slow. Indeed, Chen Guang didn't see anything, but his senses were sharp. Just a moment ago, he suddenly felt an obscure energy fluctuation coming from the front. The feeling was fleeting. If it were someone else, they would have ignored it or thought it was a nervous reaction. However, Chen Guang was very alert. He wasn't nervous at all, so he was sure that there was something in front of him. As expected, as he got closer, the feeling of emptiness in front of him grew stronger. However, he increasingly felt that there was something hidden in front of him. He was highly focused. As he touched, he suddenly jumped back. In the next moment, two figures appeared out of thin air. At the same time, a water-like trace streaked past his nose. When Chen Guang came to a stop, he finally got a clear look at the two humanoid figures. Two figures, one black and one white, floated in the air. Their long robes hung down from their shoulders, but they didn't touch the ground. The two figures didn't have legs, and there was nothing under their robes. Apart from that, they were also wearing two pointy hats, but there was no face under the hats. Instead, there were two human heads protruding from the collars of their robes, and there was nothing inside the black hole. It was amazing that they were black and white impermanents. But which black and white impermanence would carry a sickle? What had just slashed across the tip of his nose were the two black and white sides that were gradually taking shape. Their combination of Chinese and Western was tarnishing Wuxia's traditional culture. Wait, most of the settings of the world in a cup were based on my own thoughts? Is that how I view the black and white impermanence? AI, it's scary to be uncultured. I have to spend more time reading and consolidate the traditional culture in my mind. Fortunately, nobody knows that it came from my mind. Otherwise, it'll be embarrassing. Why are the black and white impermanents carrying sickles? Isn't that the equipment of the Grim Reaper in Western mythology? Shouldn't the black and white impermanents carry a soul-attracting banner? Fortunately, Peasant was knowledgeable, and he saw through the uneasiness of the situation. Chen Guang said righteously, "The massacre mission settings are sometimes stupid. Don't mind the details." As he turned to speak to Peasant, the black and white impermanents waved their death sickles. Though the magical beasts weren't as intelligent as humans, their combat skills were innate. When they saw Chen Guang distracted, they attacked immediately. Facing the two large sickles, Chen Guang twisted his body at a strange angle and dodged between the two sickles. He instinctively used the unique skill he learned in the realm of true martial. It was called breeze-brushing willow. It was suitable for dodging large sharp weapons in a chaotic battle. When he used breeze-brushing willow, his body would become as light as a willow catkin. He would float with the slightest breeze, and the sickles wouldn't be able to hit him. The black and white impermanents weren't weak. After their first strike failed, they waved their sickles again. There wasn't even a slight breeze, and the sickles became faster. Chen Guang had to dodge, but his posture wasn't as elegant. At the same time, he observed the intricacies of the black and white impermanence's moves. When the black and white impermanents waved their sickles for the third time, their sickles trembled violently. An unknown force drew out a black hole in front of the sickles, and they didn't cause any disturbances in the airflow. The speed of their evolution was so fast that it made one's hair stand on end. Chen Guang gritted his teeth and retaliated. He punched the black and white impermanence twice. After sending the black and white impermanence flying, the black and white impermanence charged back. Chen Guang punched again, but before his fist could touch the black and white impermanence, a ripple-like hole appeared on the black and white impermanence's bodies. Chen Guang's fist hit empty air, and he had to raise his hands to withstand the two death sides. The black and white impermanents are evolving. Peasant shouted in surprise from afar. Chen Guang was speechless as he said, "You don't have to tell me that. I'm not blind." He was puzzled. Compared to the magical beasts, the black and white impermanents were much stronger, and each of their moves was evolving. After fighting for a while, he was furious that the magical beasts kept finding trouble with the easily bullied peasant. The black and white impermanents were stubborn and only focused on him. After fighting for more than an hour, Chen Guang wasn't able to kill the black and white impermanence. Instead, the black and white impermanence became stronger. During this period of time, the other players either died in battle or completed the collection, but no one told them how long the deadline for the quest was. The gamers thought that the lack of notification meant that the mission wasn't coming, but Chen Guang understood the characteristics of the world in a cup. The lack of notification meant that the mission could come at any time. Forget it, let's not waste time with these two creatures. Let's go. The black and white impermanence were too tanky, so Chen Guang decided to give up on the black and white impermanence and search for new magical beasts. He had just finished speaking when there was a rumbling sound coming from the front and back. The two of them were dumbfounded. Two walls were erected in the front and back of the labyrinth, trapping the two of them and the black and white impermanence. It was called closing the door and beating the dog. Chen Guang gave a thumbs up. I'm in awe. I can't escape even if I want to? As he was ridiculing the black and white impermanence, a notification appeared in their minds. The two of them were entangled with the black and white impermanence for too long. Even the fat household appliance had collected all 10 targets. At this moment, Chen Guang started to panic. Peasant felt that the situation wasn't good. She gritted her teeth and suggested an idea. Mr. Dang, can you release your resistance and let me use time deceleration to trap you, me, and the two black and white impermanents? I'll see if I can stall for time. If you can't collect all the targets by the time you die, we'll be doomed. Chen Guang thought that was a good idea, but he asked, do you have enough reward points? Peasant was about to say that she could only stall for time when she heard the sound of the reward points shop ringing. She looked at the reward points system and almost vomited blood. What was going on? When did I buy the reward points lottery ticket? And I bought 2 consecutive tickets? And they were both top prizes. Did I win the 5 million grand prize? 2 tickets? Why wasn't it a whole number? Why was there an odd number? Also, what was the meaning of can only be used for the operation of the hourglass in the brackets? I won the lottery, and you're asking me if I'm buying a house or a car. She didn't know how to express her feelings and didn't know how to rebuke Dang. She didn't dare to think that the nearly 10 million reward points could be used to upgrade her awakened abilities. Mr. Dang, I have enough reward points, quite enough. I can't explain it in a few words, but it's definitely enough. Peasant understood that she didn't buy the lottery ticket. It must be the mastermind behind the scenes. The mastermind wanted her to record the entire battle between Mr. Dang and the black and white impermanence. The longer the better. This was such a strong desire to peep. Chapter 1190. But wasn't the actions of the mastermind behind the scenes a little too childish? Peasant thought to herself, and she couldn't help but feel suspicious. She was inexplicably given nearly 10 million reward points, which made her have serious doubts about the rigor of the game. She could only keep this matter to herself. She couldn't tell Chen Guang. Chen Guang looked at her suspiciously, but he didn't ask further. Perhaps the tens of thousands of reward points she received were sufficient for her expenses, or perhaps her awakened ability had evolved, so the expenditure wasn't as high. Everyone who participated in this massacre mission had their own secrets. The important thing wasn't why she could do it, but the outcome. A few seconds later, Chen Guang felt a peculiar sensation. However, he didn't feel any obvious changes, so it was still the same as before. When Peasant, who was a distance away, spoke, he discovered the problem. Her voice was extremely low, and it was like a slow-motion voice. Peasant felt something was amiss. He took a step forward and recovered his composure. Success! Chen Guang nodded and said, can you try to control the time flow of the black and white deities around me? Make their movements slower, and it'll be easier for me to deal with them. Peasant shook her head and said, this is called differential control. It's too difficult. I can't do it now. Perhaps I can only do it after my 3rd awakening. She felt regretful. It was a pity that the lottery she won could only be used on her awakened ability and couldn't be upgraded. Otherwise, you're right, I'm thinking too much. Chen Guang turned around and fought with the black and white deities. This time, the battle between Peasant and the 2 magical beasts was like a landslide. They fought from the ground of the labyrinth to the sky, then to the ground, and then to the wall. Even the high walls of the labyrinth of chaos, which were described as indestructible in the illustration card, had been smashed into countless pieces by the fight between the man and the two magical beasts. However, these pieces would disappear abruptly after falling to the ground. As for the scars on the walls, they would also quickly recover. Chen Guang had no choice. He couldn't escape. The black and white deities weren't to be trifled with. They were evolved with advanced technology, and they couldn't be killed. Basically, his techniques could only be used once. The first time was effective, but the second time would be countered. If the black and white deities couldn't deal with his techniques using normal methods, they would forcefully evolve abnormal methods. For example, they would grow a third hand at a critical moment, or their joints could rotate 360 degrees, and they would completely nullify Chen Guang's joint technique. Besides that, Chen Guang's strange techniques that were related to the black and white deities were useless. Even the strongest inner strength could only hit the black and deities of the black and divine. Only simple punches and kicks could hit the bodies of the black and white impermanents, barely causing some damage to these two fellows, but they would quickly recover. Though there was the support of the hourglass, time was ticking by. Chen Guang couldn't sense how much slower Peasant was. After half an hour, he received another notification that a normal gamer had completed the collection. He counted with his fingers. There were less than half of the gamers who hadn't completed the collection. Besides the dead gamers, about 1/3 of the gamers had completed the collection. Tens of hours passed, and he didn't know how much time had passed in the outside world. There were notifications of gamers completing the collection or being reset. After deducting the dead gamers and successful gamers, there were only 6 gamers left. There were 2 weak divine race members, Chen Guang, Peasant, and 2 other weak gamers. During the battle, Chen Guang had to let Peasant carry the functions of a smurf. That was to buy potions. The main character was in charge of fighting, while the smurf had to give the blue and red potions. That was the right thing to do. Every time Chen Guang asked Peasant for the medicine, he felt uncomfortable and couldn't bring himself to ask. The first time, he said, "Help me buy some Viagra sustained-release capsules." That wasn't appropriate, and it was very wrong. The second time, he said, "Help me buy some small blue pills." He still felt that it wasn't right. The third time, he thought of something reliable. Buy potions. Peasant understood the meaning of the word. He didn't need the gold sore medicine, but his stamina was depleted, so he had to take the pills to replenish his body. "Mr. Dang, are we going to die?" Peasant couldn't be bothered to think about the mastermind of the side mission. Not only was Mr. Dang unable to complete the collection mission, but he was also doomed. Chen Guang didn't know how to console her, so he said, "I don't think we're going to die." Just as he finished speaking, there was another notification. The 2 gods had completed their collection. It can't be that the deadline is for everyone to gather, right? As Chen Guang was complaining, he received a piece of bad news. The last 2 ordinary gamers had perished. That meant that in the vast chaos labyrinth, only Peasant and himself were left. That was awkward. With this thought in his heart, Chen Guang did the same thing as before and lashed out with his leg, kicking the black and white impermanents in a casual yet powerful manner. Previously, he had used similar force on the 2 creatures more than 1,000 times, but it was useless. He could only repel them. But this time, it was completely different from before. With a loud bang, the 2 magical beasts that could not be killed no matter how hard they tried suddenly fell apart like broken porcelain. Chen Guang and Peasant were dumbfounded. "That's it," Peasant said in a daze. He seemed to be asking Chen Guang and muttering to himself. Chen Guang asked, "Did you see the target?" A small man whose face can't be seen, and a Peasant bent down and picked up the items that Chen Guang couldn't see. She was bewildered, and she couldn't speak properly. After a brief pondering, Chen Guang figured it out. That person must be his acting idol, and the reason why he couldn't see his face was probably because the miniature version was too crude, or perhaps the slaughtering realm was trying to protect his privacy. As for the other target, he recalled the first target that Peasant collected. If he wasn't wrong, it should be the statue of the strongest pile driver in history. The original statue of God in Cloud City was only an inch long, but for peasants, Chen Guang squinted his eyes and pretended not to understand. He asked, "What's wrong? Is there a problem? Besides the small man, what else is there?" Peasant shook her head and held something in her left and right hands. Then she stood up and said, "It's nothing. I've collected all 10 targets." Chen Guang could tell that she had raised her left hand when she was talking about the little person. Then, the miniature version of the pile driver statue should be in her right hand. However, from the shape of her right hand, it wasn't a miniature version at all. It was exactly the same size as the real one. Didn't that mean that she was holding a miniature version of Chen Guang's? Forget it, he couldn't think about it. It was good to think about it. Chen Guang shuddered. No, it wasn't just Peasant who wanted to collect the divine pile driver statue. The rest of the gamers, including Yu Ting and the strong gamers, wanted to collect the divine pile driver statue. But he abruptly clutched his chest, and goosebumps rose all over his body like he had been electrocuted. That little bit of happiness in his heart had long since flown beyond the highest heavens. That's strange. Why is there an excavator among the targets? Mr. Adam, do you know why? I didn't want to ask such a childish question, but I couldn't help it. Peasant waved his right hand and asked, "Excavator? Did you see wrongly? It's a pile driver?" Peasant was shocked. "It's true. Mr. Adam, aren't you unable to see or touch it? How did you know?" She realized something at once. Chen Guang realized that he had said something wrong. He laughed and said, "I guessed it." "Guessed it?" Peasant trembled. "I received a notice that I've completed the mission and will be teleported out of the labyrinth of chaos." Chen Guang looked bitter as he said, "I also received a notice that the mission time is up." What do we do?" Peasant screamed, and her body started to fade uncontrollably. Chen Guang looked at her fading figure and said, "You're asking me, but who should I ask?" The setting of this lousy mission was illogical. He had failed the mission so easily. Was he going to be erased and reset? His personal strength was clearly the strongest in the entire quest segment, and he had clearly been killing monsters the entire time. Yet, he had encountered such a strange situation. Who could he reason with? Who could he blame? Blame Peasant? It was only right and proper for her to follow him. Strictly speaking, bringing her along could not be considered as bringing along a burden. In such a long period of time, he should have been able to kill more than 20 phantom beasts, but he inexplicably encountered 2 black and white impermanents that couldn't be killed and couldn't run away. He wasted the rest of the time on these 2 overly fierce phantom beasts. If all the illusory beasts were this strong, then he would admit defeat in a fair and square manner. But the others had just passed or been eliminated. The black and white deities were destroyed. The massacre world's motive was obvious. He had lost unjustly. Peasant's figure had completely disappeared. Chen Guang silently lifted his head to look at the crimson vortex that appeared above his head. The electronic notifications sounded in his mind. Gamer failed the afternoon mission and will be killed immediately. Along with this voice, a beam of light descended from the sky and enveloped him. Chen Guang was furious. "D*****, I'm not playing anymore. You're cheating me." Chapter 1191. If he was judged to have lost the mission, he wouldn't have been so angry. However, this whole thing was so weird that he couldn't accept it, and he lost in such a weird way. Of course, he wasn't convinced. Unfortunately, he couldn't contact Azure, otherwise, he could at least find someone to reason with. Now, he had nowhere to redress his grievances, and nowhere to vent his anger. He didn't know who he should be angry at. However, the whirlpool above his head that was trying to suck him in was actually covering his body. All of this was telling him that it was King Real. The unlucky killing world really wanted to kill him, the owner of the Heavenly Grail. Chen Guang thought that he might have picked up a fake cup, or that the Heavenly Grail recognized a fake owner. How could you mess with the owner like that? Let me be the NPC grandpa who brought people to level, and I accepted it. After all, I am a good person who loves to help others. But why can other people strengthen their abilities, and I can only stare at them? When I finally made myself have n times more reward points than others, and was able to press the button to strengthen my abilities, what kind of awakening ability did you give me? Other people's awakening ability could be turned into combat strength, and at the very least, it would be a support or a healer, or like the fat household appliance guy, who had some weird abilities. What was this? A ladle that specialized in scamming myself? How many reward points did I lose? I could only stare at the hundreds and thousands of items in the shop. If it wasn't for the fact that I couldn't buy things, I wouldn't have been bothered by the black and white impermanence for so long. There was a magical pill in the shop that could increase combat strength by more than 2 times. Although it was quite expensive, costing up to 1,000,000 reward points, I should have been able to afford it. Stop joking, you want to kill me just like that? Impossible. The light projected from the blood-colored vortex seemed to be strange. After it surrounded Qin, he gradually felt a strong tearing force, as if it wanted to tear his body apart. At first, the tearing force was not strong. It was equivalent to a girl pinching the flesh on her body. But gradually, the force became more and more violent. Not only that, but the strange vibration even directly shook the internal energy in Qin's dantian. Of course, Qin would not resign himself to death. Instead, he clenched his teeth and focused all his attention on his dantian, forcefully condensing his inner strength to resist the tearing force from the inside out. At this moment, he felt as if he had fallen into a whirlpool formed by a strong current, or as if he was a piece of tattered clothes thrown into a washing machine. As time passed, the spinning force of the washing machine became more and more violent, and the tearing force on his body became stronger and stronger. At first, Qin only used the conventional convergence of power to resist, but after about 10 seconds, he had to take a horse stance and use a technique like 1,000 pounds falling. After another minute, Qin simply sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes, not daring to be careless. At this time, he didn't look special at all. He didn't even have the original temperament of a martial arts master because he had restrained all the internal energy and momentum into his body. But this was still not enough. The tearing force projected by the blood-colored vortex was still increasing, almost endless. Drops of sweat gradually appeared on Qin's forehead, showing how hard he was working at this time. But the strange thing was that even if he felt that his body was about to be torn apart, the sweat on his forehead still didn't move, and even his hair didn't float. At this time, Qin was also ruthless. In his mind, he kept recalling the unique skills that he had learned to deal with qi deviation, such as White Jade Heart Sutra, 18 Methods of Questioning Heaven, Delusion-Breaking Skill, Ice Mountain, and many other strange and unique skills. Under the drive of his true martial divine skill, he used all of them one by one. Only God knew how many kinds of skills he used at the same time. Only a great grandmaster like him, who had spent more than 100,000 years in the realm of true martial arts to thoroughly master 400,000 kinds of unique skills and had figured out a unique skill that could be cultivated to the martial sage realm, could multitask and do this. But there was a limit to a person's ability. After using so many skills for a long time, Qin's brain couldn't take it. Fortunately, each of these techniques had the effect of calming one's mind while stabilizing one's inner strength. In short, they could make one calmer and have a clearer mind. After layers of similar skills were stacked on top of each other, the limits of the brain's operation were greatly developed. It allowed him to use more than 20 different skills in his mind at the same time. But there were also side effects. It was like when a person took too much tranquilizers, his mind would become unclear and he would hallucinate. Extreme calmness and clarity was equivalent to going from one extreme to the other. It could even be said that a person's personality would change drastically. At this time, Qin was in such a state. After layers of skills were stacked on top of each other, he was completely calm, like a Spartan. He didn't know if he was still himself. Although there were many things going on in his mind at the same time, it was as if nothing was happening in his mind. It was as if his mind was completely empty. What's more, in the world in the cup, his body should have been reconstructed with a spiritual body as the foundation. But now, he actually had the feeling that his soul was out of his body. Did I look inside too much, causing it to turn into an external vision? At this time, Qin Guang felt very mysterious. It was as if his soul had floated outside, but it was as if nothing had happened. He was only in a trance, vaguely looking at himself outside his body, but it was as if he was still sitting cross-legged on the same spot like an old monk. Suddenly, his body trembled slightly. It seemed that after attacking him for a long time without being able to take him down, the power of the blood-red vortex had once again increased. In addition to the inner strength, the tearing force of the vortex had gone one step further and pounced on another kind of power in his body, which was the Earth Exploder's elemental core. Not only that, the sweat that was stuck to his temples flew out with a whoosh. Finally, it started to work on his body. For a moment, the tearing force of the blood-red vortex that was used to kill him became a triple effect from his body to his inner strength, and then to the elemental power. Of course, Qin Guang would not sit still and wait for death. So far, he had not used the rather strange talent of the Earth Exploder, because under normal circumstances, this skill was basically useless. But now was the time to take it out. With another thought, his body, which had just begun to tremble slightly under the influence of the tearing force, suddenly became completely still again. If someone else were to see it, they would notice that the surface of his body had suddenly glowed with a metallic luster. In just a few seconds, with the center of his eyebrows as the source point, his body gradually became transparent. Like the water in a cup that was suddenly frozen, his body quickly became completely transparent at a speed visible to the naked eye. That's right, Qin Guang's skill was called the legendary petrification. And what he petrified was not ordinary stone, but diamond. It's completely different from Medusa's petrification. Although Qin Guang could also use it, he's more formidable when it comes to petrifying himself. It's a complete petrification without leaving any openings. His entire body would turn transparent. If someone picked it up, coupled with the bald image of him sitting cross-legged and meditating, that person would probably be happy that they had obtained the crystal Buddha statue for free. The only flaw was that he was not dressed in a serious manner and was not wearing a kasaya. Once the diamond transformation was used, the effect was outstanding. The tearing force of the blood-red vortex instantly became a tickle. Baldy Qin Guang said, "How can a small fry like you want to kill the old man? Why don't you think about who your real master is? Go to sleep and quickly pass the test for me. Trying to trick me? No way." Outside, the two groups of players who had escaped from the labyrinth of chaos were still clearly divided into two groups. On one side were the mortals, and on the other side were the Protoss. Both sides were solemn, and each had their own ulterior motives. Many of the Protoss members had perished. Without Yu Ting's reminder, the other Protoss members knew the difficulty of the mission. If they were not careful, their projections would perish here. On the other side, the mortals felt as though they were struck by lightning. They didn't expect their backer, Mr. Dang, to perish in the labyrinth of chaos without a word. It was a blow to their heads. "Miss Peasant, did Mr. Dang not collect a single target at the last moment?" The hale and hearty old man asked in disbelief. Peasant nodded and said, "It's my fault. If I hadn't traveled with him and allowed him to act alone, he would have been the first gamer to leave the labyrinth of chaos. You knew you would be a burden to him, but you insisted on pestering him. I don't think you're that noble," the card magician said sarcastically. Previously, he didn't like Dang Wu, but when he realized that he might lose his backer, the card magician felt pain. Previously, he had always disliked Tang Wu, but when he realized that he might really lose his backer, the card magician knew what it meant to be in pain. "Yes, it's my fault." Peasant didn't want to defend herself. Though she had suggested splitting up with Dang many times, she knew that she didn't want to do so because she had the side mission that she couldn't escape from. The elf archer stood up for her and said, "What do you mean? What's the point of saying such nonsense? Do you want Peasant to commit suicide as an apology to the world? What right do you have to criticize Peasant? You dare to do it, but you don't dare to talk about it? Now that Mr. Dang is gone, nobody will spoil you. You'd better behave yourself." The elf archer raised his eyebrows and took out his inferior elven warrior magical bow. He knocked an arrow and aimed at the card magician. Do you think I'm afraid of you? What? Internal strife. Do you think I'm afraid of you? The card magician frowned. He flicked his wrist, and 4 cards appeared between his fingers. The atmosphere on the scene became tense and hostile for a moment. We've been out for more than 3 minutes, and there's no notification of Mr. Dang Wu's death. The huge labyrinth walls haven't disappeared. Perhaps to us, the mission is over. But to him, the mission is still ongoing? At this moment, it was the genius high school student who raised a different point of view, inadvertently reminding the others. The magical archer and magic magician put away their weapons. They felt that the high school student was right. All right, everyone, calm down. Mission 8 isn't over. We have to believe in Dang Wu's ability. Now, let's be on alert. Those who have third awakening should make good use of the time. There's only one mission left. We can't drop the ball at the last moment. The hale and hearty old man stood up and controlled the situation. Chapter 1192. On the other side, Qin Guang, who had completely transformed into a diamond Buddha statue, still maintained his complete consciousness. However, he himself felt that it was a little strange. There were still countless meridians in his sparkling and translucent body that allowed him to circulate his inner strength. However, this inner strength had turned into a completely formless and colorless liquid. It flowed steadily, slowly, but with a high efficiency through his meridians, maintaining the effects of the cultivation technique. This was a very mysterious state. It was just like a novel that Qin Guang had once read, in which the legendary silicon-based organism was mentioned. At that time, he was very surprised. Wasn't silicon-based silicon dioxide, which was also quartz? How did people with quartz think? Quartz didn't conduct electricity, so how did brain waves work? He was puzzled no matter how he thought about it. Now, he roughly understood a little. Pure quartz looked extremely similar to diamond. In addition, diamond didn't conduct electricity, but his brain was still working smoothly. This meant that silicon-based wasn't important. It had nothing to do with how he thought. As for the scientific principle behind it? Come on, I'm already in the world within the cup. Why are you still talking to me about science? In short, after transforming into a diamond, the tearing force transmitted by the blood-colored vortex completely lost its effect on him for the time being. The so-called direct obliteration of the slaughtering world was met with the strongest resistance from him, the master of the transcendent Holy Grail. Only he could forcefully resist the command of the slaughtering world. If it were anyone else, even the most tyrannical divine emperor of the Protoss, the divine emperor of Yuting, could only close his eyes and wait for death. This direct obliteration force continued to grow stronger and stronger. However, the diamond Buddha statue that Qin Guang had transformed into remained immovable. The naked eye couldn't see the difference, but in reality, Qin Guang's physical body was still slowly petrifying. This subtle change was merely concealed by his completely transparent body. There was no end to the beautification of the structure of matter. Even if the most advanced microscope of human technology could never see any difference, it could happen at the level of molecules, atoms, and even electrons, and even the smaller quark particles. It was like a chemical reaction. Matter would constantly react and evolve towards a more stable form. Of course, there would always be a limit to normal chemical reactions. It had to conform to the rules of the universe. For example, if hydrogen and oxygen were mixed and burned to produce water, it would not produce a more stable substance that humans had never seen before, because in the current state of the universe, water was already the most stable structure of hydrogen and oxygen compounds. Another example was the structure of the carbon atom. Carbon-60, diamond, and graphite were all very stable, but when it came to hardness, diamond was undoubtedly the strongest. It could even be said that under the laws of the real universe, the hardness of diamond was the extreme of the carbon atom structure. However, this was the world in the cup, Qin Guang's territory. Strictly speaking, no matter how similar this world was to the real world, there was a fundamental difference. These were two completely different worlds, so the rules would naturally be different. That was exactly what was happening at the moment. his body was trembling ever so slightly, and with every tremble, the Vajrabuddha statue's deepest layer of particles would undergo a subtle change, making his body even more sturdy, using physical methods to seal his inner strength and elemental power within his body. There were advantages and disadvantages to doing this. The advantages were self-evident, but the disadvantages were reflected in his thinking. Obviously, there was a difference in the way carbon-based creatures and silicon-based creatures thought. One used bioelectricity to form thoughts and brainwaves, while the other, well, Chen Guang did not know what that was. It was all nonsense in novels, and he had to experience it himself to know how powerful it was. As a newly minted Vajrabuddha statue, he felt that his body structure was becoming more and more solid and hard, but his brain was not working very well. To put it simply, his thinking had become rigid and completely out of control. The old man was too careless. I was still feeling proud just now, but karma came quickly. Chen Guang silently muttered to himself. It was such a simple sentence, but it took him at least a minute to think of it. Forget it. Anyway, I'll just pretend that I set a default program for myself and let it run automatically. At this time, as his thinking solidified, it actually became more effortless. He did not need to deliberately urge the dozens of techniques that were running at the same time. His mind was like a computer automatically rendering blueprints, advancing the mental cultivation method control automatically. On the other hand, Chen Guang added another setting to his mind, and continued to strengthen the process of perfecting the Vajrabuddha statue. In short, he was going to go head-to-head with the world of slaughter. He would not resign himself to fate. After setting the default program, the thoughts in his mind completely stopped. It was a bit like he had fallen into a deep sleep, and also a bit like he was being hypnotized. In a muddle-headed state, his mind was in chaos, and everything around him began to become hazy. Moreover, as time passed, his thoughts became slower and slower, and his thoughts became more and more relaxed. He forgot about the blood-colored vortex above his head, forgot about the world of slaughter, and even forgot that he was currently under the direct obliteration of the world within a cup. The tearing force transmitted by the vortex became stronger and stronger. If this was the outside world, this kind of force could tear apart everything. Even the sturdiest concrete floor would be completely torn into powder or even annihilated. But there was a description written on the walls and floor of this maze of chaos: indestructible. Even if fragments fell due to a short period of shaking, these fragments would instantly dissipate into the most primitive form of energy, and then return to the walls or floor. The floor and high walls of the maze of chaos were nearly invincible, and there was a completely invincible energy cycle. At this time, the Vajrabuddha statue was surrounded by a dense fog. This fog was the powder that had been forcibly torn off the floor, but often before it could float past the head of the Vajrabuddha statue, it would quickly collapse, and then directly return to the ground in the form of energy. About 2 minutes later, deep pitch-black cracks appeared around the Vajra statue that Chen Guang had transformed into like a spider web. These cracks all disappeared in a flash, and the time they existed was extremely short, perhaps not even a femtosecond. It was impossible to see with the naked eye, but it made people feel that the light around Chen Guang had dimmed a bit. About another 2 minutes later, these cracks that should not have been seen with the naked eye gradually became clear. The reason was that after the small cracks came together, they fused in pairs, and even existed for a slightly longer time. If there was a crack that was lucky, then before it disappeared, another crack would, luckily, appear next to it, and after fusing again, it would exist for a longer time. These countless small and undetectable coincidences combined to form hair-thin cracks that were scattered around Chen Guang. After a while, these cracks became thicker and thicker, and in the end, they were even as thick as a thumb. There was only endless darkness within the cracks, a bottomless darkness. This was space being torn apart, but Chen Guang's Vajra body still stood tall. When space was torn to the extreme, yet it could not break through the indestructible floor of the labyrinth of chaos, and at the same time, it could not destroy the Vajra statue Chen Guang standing in the middle. The tearing force further strengthened, and thus affected the flow of time. Time was endlessly accelerated, and thus affected Chen Guang's thinking. His originally extremely slow thinking suddenly returned to a normal speed. This was an extremely mysterious and indescribable state. Vaguely, he felt as if his mind was traveling to the ends of the world. His mind was chaotic and hazy, but he could see everything clearly. He felt as if he had fallen into a dream. This dream was boundless and incomparably vast. This feeling was even greater than when he had upgraded the heavenly Holy Grail from the first to the second level, and his mind had followed the power of the Holy Grail to roam the universe. But he could not see anything clearly. There was no galaxy in his mind, and he did not even have the concept of space and time. Suddenly, he seemed to hear the sound of something breaking. It sounded like a butterfly breaking out of a cocoon, or like a phoenix undergoing nirvana. After he completely let go of his thoughts, he suddenly turned his head and saw a tender sprout growing out of thin air in the void. It then soared into the sky and extended towards the boundless horizon. No, it could not be called the horizon. At this moment, he did not have the concept of up and down, left and right, nor did he have the concept of time in the past, present, and future. After the sound of something breaking, it seemed as if millions of years had passed, but it also seemed as if it had only taken an instant to form this enormous plant in front of him. Suddenly, Chen Guang's consciousness trembled slightly. He lowered his head and looked down again. He actually saw an endless root system at the bottom of this plant. This root system was intertwined and spread out, and it was like a huge cloud that enveloped the bottomless abyss below. He actually saw an endless root system beneath the plant. The root system was intertwined and spread out, like a huge cloud that shrouded the bottomless abyss below. The thickness of this plant's root system and the area it spread out over was at least 10 times that of its upper body. It was so enormous that it could not be described with words. Chen Guang did not understand what this meant at all. He did not even know how his consciousness had entered this mysterious state. At this moment, the truly emotionless electronic notification of the heavenly Holy Grail suddenly rang in his heart. Congratulations, Redeemer. You have fulfilled the conditions. The heavenly Holy Grail is upgrading. Chen Guang was overjoyed. Although he did not know what conditions he had fulfilled, he had inexplicably upgraded the broken Grail. This was a blessing in disguise. Just as he was happily thinking about it, a loud noise suddenly came from the void. A thud. It sounded like thunder, but also like someone was stamping their feet. Upgrade complete. Redeemer is currently performing a mission. The next mission will be directly upgraded to the third layer, Cloud Elephant Sky. Redeemer's current mission environment is abnormal. Repairing, beep beep beep. This sound was a little like the sound of the motherboard's self-test program when a computer was booted up. Then, Aya. Chen Guang thought he had heard wrongly. To his surprise, he heard a sharp and clear scream. Nothing happened after the scream, but the tearing force that had enveloped his body suddenly disappeared. The notification sounded again, but this time it was the slightly strange electronic notification that made him feel like it might have feelings. Congratulations, player. You have successfully resisted the obliteration. The Labyrinth of Chaos mission is completed. Reward points will be issued immediately. Chen Guang cursed in his mind at a super slow yet super fast speed. What kind of lousy mission system is this? There's such a godly operation? Forcefully resisting and successfully completing the mission. Chapter 1193. Also, who was the one screaming just now? What was that dong sound? Whose moral integrity had fallen to the ground? Forget it, it was not important. Since he had successfully resisted it, he could finally relax and slowly remove the petrified state. He did not dare to disperse his cultivation first. If it were not for the dozens of martial emperor secret arts that could stabilize the mind, he did not know whether his will could withstand the shock of turning into an immovable diamond. Who can tell me what's going on now? You ask me, but who should I ask? Didn't they say that the Labyrinth of Chaos mission is over? Why is the 9th mission not here yet? What do you think the 9th mission might be? Is it killing monsters or a labyrinth? Or something else? Forget it, don't guess. In any case, it definitely won't be as simple as the cockroach mission. This is the last stage. If we can pass it, we might be able to get out. The fat household appliance student said happily, "This is really a special experience. From now on, I will no longer be the same person as before. The first thing I will do when I get back is to fire my boss." Ha! Damn, fatty, you're a salesperson in an electrical appliance store outside, right? The genius high school student suddenly asked. The fatty was shocked. "How did you know?" The genius high school student snorted and then said, "It's all written on your face. I'm just reminding you that it's best not to talk about the outside world here. Everyone here is smart. If you talk a little more, they might guess where you are and what you're doing. Even if we can leave this place soon, no one knows what will happen in the future. Rashly exposing your true identity is undoubtedly very dangerous. For example, who knows if we can keep our memories after we get out? Also, will everyone's reward points be snatched by others? Otherwise, in the face of the threat of life and death, what will you do if others ask you to obediently hand over the things you bought?" When he said these words, he did not deliberately avoid the others. Instead, he deliberately raised his voice. When the others heard this, they did not express their opinion. Although they did not say the ugly words as clearly as he did, they actually thought so in their hearts. "Oh, I understand. Then I can't even tell you?" The fat household appliance student asked with his shoulders shrunk. The genius high school student smiled calmly. "If you're willing to tell me, of course I'm willing to listen." Fatty always felt that this young man's expression was very sinister, but he could also be pretending to be sinister to scare people. "Forget it, let's change the topic. What does it mean to be a teacher? Ask him yourself." Outside, the crowd who had been waiting for God knows how long could not help but whisper. Although no one had a watch on them, everyone had a simple concept of time. Unknowingly, several hours had passed, but there was still no movement. No one knew what was going on. Everyone was panicking, but they couldn't find an answer. "Let's wait. We have no other choice." Peasant finally spoke. As the only person present who knew the inside story, she was actually the most knowledgeable. Others might not know if the mission had really failed that afternoon, but she had seen it with her own eyes and knew it clearly. If it was someone else, Peasant would have died. But Tang Wu was different. Peasant felt that Tang Wu wouldn't die so easily. Perhaps he could resist the rules of the game system. Perhaps he was doing that now. Otherwise, why was there no movement even after the Chaos Labyrinth mission had ended? On the other hand, after Qin Guang's mission was judged to be completed, he wasn't released immediately. After an hour, he was finally released from his petrified state and the state of absolute calmness. He stood up in bewilderment. He examined his body and surveyed his surroundings. He was still in the Chaos Labyrinth, but there were no side effects from the petrification. His movements were slightly inconvenient, but it was probably due to poor blood circulation after meditating for a long time. He would be fine after taking a few more steps. "Hey, is there anyone here? Let me out after my mission is completed." He shouted at the top of his lungs, but no one answered him. Truth be told, Qin Guang wasn't really hoping for anyone to pay attention to him. It's just that he had vaguely heard a moment ago that made him suspicious. Hence, he purposely acted to see if he could trick the person who might or might not exist. But he didn't succeed, and no one responded to him. After waiting for a long time, there were finally changes. First, the promised reward points arrived in his account. He heard a series of dang-dang sounds in his system. Qin Guang accessed his system and looked at it intently. He was convinced. He saw the number of his reward points jump at a rather strange speed. One moment, it rose by a few thousand points, and in the next moment, it was cleared out with a whoosh. Fine, it was the same old problem of missing out on everything. Unlucky cup, what happened to the promised repair? You can't even repair a hole. Go back and fix the sewers. 100,000 reward points have been distributed. Please use them wisely. Qin Guang rolled his eyes. There was no need to be cautious. He didn't need to use them. Thank you. Wasn't it too shabby to only give 100,000 points? Previously, he had earned nearly 10 million points from Hades. Though he didn't get any blisters, it was better to have more points. Then, a gust of wind suddenly blew into his face from who knows where. He looked up and saw that the indestructible walls of the labyrinth of chaos were covered in fog. At the same time, they were rapidly disintegrating from top to bottom. Letting out a sigh in his heart, Qin Guang muttered to himself, "Mission 9 is finally here? I wonder what kind of monster I have to fight." Just as he was thinking about this, he suddenly saw the fog that was originally soaring into the skies suddenly change direction and pounce straight towards his position. Wait, what the hell is this? Is it going to be a divine infusion? But isn't this the energy that formed the walls? Is it going to turn me into a cement man? Besides, shouldn't it be time to prepare for task 9? Isn't the labyrinth of chaos over? It would be fine if the walls just disappeared. Why is it coming at me? It was a pity that what was happening would not change because of his complaints. In the blink of an eye, he was completely wrapped up in the extremely thick white fog once again. Not only that, even though he had already shut his mouth and held his breath, he was still unable to stop the fog from entering his body through the capillaries on the surface of his body. In an instant, he felt that there was something different in his body. Seeing that the situation was not good, he used a ruthless move. He made the earthen yellow armor on the surface of his body continue to cover up, wrapping his entire body. Not only that, he also solidified the surface of the armor until it glowed with a metallic luster, making it completely airtight. In any case, he had practiced the embryonic breathing technique, so it was not a problem for him to not breathe for a long time. With regards to this kind of unknown power, Qin Guang felt that it was best not to come into contact with it. He had just become a diamond Buddha statue, and in the blink of an eye, he had become a stone statue. If this went on, he would have to change his name to a stone man. However, his resistance only lasted for perhaps less than 5 seconds. In the blink of an eye, the fog was like before, directly passing through space and appearing in his body. Seeing this, he also accepted his fate. Since he could not stop it, he could only say that he was ruthless. Qin Guang thought to himself, I can't be killed after completing the mission, right? Maybe this is an additional reward from the heavenly Holy Grail for repairing the slaughter world? That's good. If I think like this, everything is right. Life is like being forced. Since I can't resist, I'll just close my eyes and enjoy it. In any case, even if I open my eyes now, I can't see anything, only a vast expanse of whiteness in front of me. I'll probably be fine after a while. Maybe, before completely losing consciousness, this was what Qin Guang thought to himself. At the same time, the people outside were also looking at the rapidly disappearing walls of the labyrinth. Everyone also let out a long sigh of relief. It was finally going to end. However, it was unknown who reacted first, but someone said loudly, "Did everyone notice? We didn't hear the notification that Mr. Dang was killed in battle." Everyone shuddered. But there was no notification that he completed the mission either. Then is he dead or not? What are you saying? Can you speak? Do you want Mr. Dang to die? I didn't mean that, I'm just curious. Come on. That's what you're thinking. I can see your complacent expression. If you want to incriminate someone, you can always find a pretext. What do you want? Do you think I'm afraid of you? After the MMA instructor died, the hale and hearty old man became a little more proactive. Seeing that the two of them were getting fiercer and fiercer, he suddenly stood up and yelled, all right, everyone stop talking. We're almost at task 9. If we don't unite, we'll really die here. The quarreling duo was startled awake and stopped using their divine powers. Peasant stood at the side and didn't say a word. She frowned, and her mind was replaying everything that had happened. She had a feeling that no one would believe her even if she told them about it. Though Mr. Dang said that he was an experienced gamer, Peasant felt that the entire game was against him. From the beginning of the mission, to the side missions that were forcefully assigned to him like a thief, to the unfair treatment he received in the labyrinth, there was an inexplicable sense of strangeness. All the signs showed that the gamers and Mr. Dang weren't playing the same game. Just like now, although the process was incomparably ridiculous, his mission was indeed a complete failure. But he didn't die. Even though the labyrinth was collapsing, he didn't die. Something beyond the gamer's understanding must have happened. Forget it, he should be out soon. Let's see if we can ask him directly. Peasant recalled the encounter in Mission 8 and felt ashamed and worried. He felt that he had tricked Mr. Dang badly in the labyrinth, so Dang wouldn't bother with him. If it were Peasant, he would have the intention to kill. Lord Yuting, should we charge in and take a look? If Dang Zheng isn't in a good situation, we can. In the celestial camp, Wethany lowered her voice and used her divine power to shield herself as she spoke carefully. Yu Ting was tempted, but he shook his head and said, "No, let's observe the situation first. Dang Zheng won't die so easily. If he isn't in a good situation, it'll be dangerous for us to act rashly." When they were dealing with the Hades fire, the Celestials had suffered greatly because they underestimated their enemy. They thought they could kill Dang Zheng, but they didn't expect Dang Zheng to counterattack. This seemed to be an opportunity, but who knew if Dang Zheng would turn misfortune into a blessing? Deep in Yu Ting's heart, he didn't want to admit another thing. He knew that the projected Celestials were going to deal with Dang Zheng, but Dang Zheng saved the lives of the Celestials during the Mosquito mission. It was unimaginable that she would feel gratitude towards him. He couldn't tell his subordinates the truth, so he had to find a reasonable excuse. Fortunately, he had sufficient prestige among the Celestials, so nobody doubted his decision. After a long time, Chen Guang opened his eyes slowly. He was surprised to find that he had grown taller. It wasn't just a little taller. It was at least 10 times his original height. He scratched his head out of habit, wondering if the wall of the labyrinth of chaos had increased in size after he merged with it. As soon as he scratched, he realized that something was wrong. His hand couldn't reach his head. Damn, did my hand become shorter? He tried to lift his hand, and then he let out a goo in shock. That's right, it was a goo. Damn, I've become a monster. Looking at the palm in front of him, Chen Guang didn't even have the mood to complain. How was this a hand? It was clearly a wing. F***CK. That was what he thought, but what came out of his mouth was a goo. At that moment, Chen Guang suddenly discovered that there were two groups of people standing a few dozen meters in front of him. One was a group of ordinary players, and the other was the Celestials led by Yu Ting. With a grunt from his mouth, the two groups of people retreated one after another. Hey, what's going on with you guys? Chen Guang wanted to ask the others, but all that came out of his mouth was a series of goo-s. Then, the two groups were shocked and immediately retreated further and further away, looking as if they wanted to keep a respectful distance. Forget it, so be it. Chen Guang was also annoyed. He turned around and planned to find a corner to crouch by himself. At the same time, he checked his other skill, the legendary strongest language master in history. Then he quickly gave up. All right, although I'm proficient in close to 5,000 languages on Earth, I haven't learned the real bird language. All right, if it was on Earth, with the old man's social skills, it wouldn't be impossible to chat with animals. Although I can't completely read the minds of animals, with my rich social experience, I can guess most of it. But I really haven't learned how to speak to humans after I become a bird. Oh, right, I can use my feet. All right, use my claws to write. Chen Guang turned around and faced the two groups of players who were ready for battle. He raised his claws, and the two groups retreated dozens of meters. Chen Guang grinned proudly. It should be split beak. You idiots, what are you afraid of? I won't eat you. He wasn't too worried. He was about to start the 9th mission. After clearing the mission, he would be a good man again, and it wouldn't affect his body in the outside world. Then, he planned to use his claws to write on the ground of the ancient Roman Colosseum. At this moment, the mission notifications suddenly rang in everyone's mind. All players, attention, the 9th mission will officially start in 3 minutes. Mission description: kill the blood pigeon. The reward will be distributed according to the damage contribution of all players. Special reminder, after the 9th mission is completed, the mission will be cleared and the final settlement will be entered. Special reminder 2, all players, please hurry up and improve your strength. The blood pigeon is very strong, do not be careless. Chen Guang thought to himself, what kind of unlucky big boss is this? It's actually being targeted by the game system. There's even such a thoughtful reminder. It's clearly telling everyone not to save up, quickly become stronger, and use all of your abilities to kill the blood pigeon. Ha, if I were that blood pigeon, I would definitely be cursing. Chen Guang took a deep breath. Although he didn't have any reward points to use, after absorbing the hellfire for a period of time, coupled with his huge body that was dozens of meters tall, his combat strength was definitely not just for show. When that blood pigeon came out, he would pounce on it and kill it, and then be done with it. Wait. He raised his right hand and swallowed his saliva. F***y, Uncle Lee. Goo 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 goo. F***y, I'm that blood pigeon. In other words, if I forcefully removed the erase setting, it would be the same as dodging the player's mission. Then, with the Holy Grail's correction, this killing mission would be completely my own. So the player's mission was to kill the blood pigeon. The old man's mission was to eat all the players to death? Does that mean that I was wholeheartedly nurturing the human race players, but I was actually nurturing my enemies? When I saved Yu Ting and the other Protoss, I was also saving my final enemy. Fix your sister, fix it? I might as well not fix it. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.